Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, mgrahamsews. This video tutorial is for this really awesome backpack. It's called the Buddy Backpack and it's by Sewing Patterns by Mrs. H. This backpack is awesome. I love it. I love all the features. There's nothing I would change about this bag. I just love it. So as you can see, it's a fairly big bag. Now my laptop is bigger, but if you have a Chromebook or something that's similar to that size for a device, you could fit that inside this bag. This would make a great backpack for a college student. This would make a great bag for a gym bag, a great travel backpack if you're looking to have, something that you can put, maybe a change of clothes because you're traveling somewhere and you just want to have a change of clothes with you. It's a really great size bag. So let's discuss some of the features of the bag. First of all, you have a flap that comes over the front of the bag with this beautiful metal edge trim. Now, I will warn, in the video, I put it on right after we constructed the flap, but you may want to wait till the very end as written in the pattern because I got excited and I put it on early. You may want to wait because you'll see in the video tutorial, which is why I'm wearing my compression gloves, I had a hard time turning the bag and it got stuck at this metal trim. So that was really my fault, nothing to do with the pattern itself. It's just because it got stuck, and then once this got stuck and I got it out, I still had a hard time because my hands at this point were sore. So my daughter came to the rescue, got the bag all turned out for me, of course, but I do recommend waiting and putting this at the end if you have problems like I do where your hands aren't very strong and you can't really manipulate things. So you can wait. That was my mistake, so I'm admitting that now. Definitely wait till the end. Another thing, I give some tips for this in the video too, so you'll definitely want to watch for that. We have our backpack straps and our handle, so great for carrying this on your arm like this or in your hand. You can loop it over one shoulder, both shoulders, whatever you want. The choice is yours, and they are adjustable. We have these feet on the bottom, so that's great because it keeps the bag off the floor or wherever you're putting it and protects it from getting dirty. So I really like that. Now, the flap is held closed with a magnetic snap, and when you open it up and you turn it to the back, we have this large pocket here. So you could put a device in there if you want. And you may notice that I have rivets here, and I know I said this at the end of the tutorial, but I made a mistake because I got excited about putting my rivets in through the back here, and she does mention in the pattern to be careful that you're not going through all the layers, that you're just going through that exterior and that's it, and the foam and everything. So she does tell you to be careful, but I got excited and I went and put it all the way through, and when my daughter got this turned out, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't get into my pocket. So I just added some rivets here after I took my rivets off. I just added some in there. So it just adds a little bit of extra bling, and it gives me something to kind of laugh at every time I look at the bag for myself not following the pattern. So it just adds a bit of bling. So yours won't have those there unless you do the same thing I do. So I am warning you now, when you get to installing your rivets here, do pay attention to how you're installing them so you don't go through all the layers like I did. The sides are cinched together with these magnetic snaps, so you can leave the magnetic snaps open to give the bag this shape like this, or have them in, and it just helps shape the bag that way. You do have a zipper closure, which I really like, so extra layer of protection on the bag. And I left my zipper tail nice and long, but if you wait until you're done the bag, don't install your hardware, wait till you're done, install it when the bag is completely done, and you can judge where you want to cut your zipper tail, so how long you want it. So if you want to put your zipper tail right here, cut it there, you can, then you can install your hardware. Inside the bag, we have this strap here with a swivel hook, great for your keys, and there's a pocket that it can go down into. Now, I did divide this pocket so it's not as long, and I'm going to use this. So for me, I have an EpiPen. I could put an EpiPen in there, an asthma pump, but my keys, if they're clipped to this, can still go down inside that pocket. Then we have a large slip pocket here, and on the other side, which might be a little bit hard to see, so I'm just going to grab a couple of pens here. There are some pen pockets, so I'm just going to put a couple of pens in the pockets. There's just a couple, and I'm just trying to use something that you can see. So my seam ripper, so you can see them right there. We've got a couple of pen pockets. So again, as I was saying, for somebody for going to work or a student and you just want to bring a couple pens with you, you have those pen pockets there. Then we have a large zipper pocket. And down inside here, we have another slip pocket. And again, they're divided up so that I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can. They're divided up so you have different sizes. And then we also have a water bottle sleeve right there. And my water bottle, I showed at the end of the tutorial. It fits nicely, but I'll show you again now, just in case you don't want to watch the whole tutorial. I'm trying to put it in just like that. So there it is. It fits nicely inside. It's a pretty big water bottle and it fits in there nicely and it doesn't fall over, which is great. You can also fit, if you have a device that'll fit in here, you can put your Chromebook or tablet or whatever inside that pocket. It is pretty deep. So there's my book. You can see it. It goes in pretty deep. That's the top of the pocket. So we have, you know, quite a bit of space. So depending on the size of your device, you may be able to put it in this pocket, which is padded because we have that fusible fleece there. So you do have a lot of ways to stay organized and really utilize this bag how you need. I just love it. I love everything about it. Like I said, there's nothing I would change. This would be a great bag to take if you go to theme parks. You know, you want to bring a water bottle with you and maybe a change of clothes because the theme park you're going to, maybe it has a water park or something. Depending on the materials you're using, you can make this a waterproof bag. So it could be more like a beach type bag so that no water gets on it or anything like that. There's so many options. You can do some really beautiful embroidery on the flap. You can fussy cut something for the front here. You can just have a lot of fun with this bag and make it in a wide variety of materials. So you can use, depending on your machine, if it can handle it, use all vinyl, faux leather, cork, or do it all in quilting cotton. There's just so many materials that you can use and really make this bag your own. It's a really beautiful design. I really love it. So now that I've shown you all the features of the bag, let's get started making our Buddy backpack.
So as always, the very first thing you'll want to do is read through the entire pattern. This is very important because not only does it familiarize yourself with the construction of the bag, but it's also important because oftentimes designers give different notes for, say, using different interfacings, or maybe materials you're using might need to be cut differently. So for example, if you're using a faux leather or cork or anything like that that doesn't fray, you may need to cut pattern pieces different. And then there's also sometimes in patterns where designers give instructions for cutting certain pattern pieces out with specific materials, such as overlays. They need to be cut with material that won't fray. So again, your vinyls, your corks. So these are very important to make note of before you not only begin cutting out your fabric, but before you begin picking your fabric, because that'll help you know what you will need when you start making your bag. So once you've read through the entire pattern and you've made all the notes you need to make, you can go ahead and get started on picking and cutting your fabric. I've already cut out all my fabric and I'm using a mix of quilting cotton and then one piece of vinyl for my flap. That is it. So I have everything already cut and interfaced already. And another thing I did, because I went ahead and I read through the pattern, was I made some marks where I needed to make marks, because in my tutorials, I don't give any measurements. I don't show any rulers, cutting mats, pattern pieces, nothing. And that's for the protection of the designer, but also because I film during testing. And oftentimes in testing, things can change. So this way here, if I don't give any measurements, my video tutorial is not affected by that at all. So you will need to have your pattern open beside you on another device, or maybe on the device you're watching this video on, just so you can follow along so you know what the measurements are and the seam allowances. So also this tutorial is filmed like a sew along, so it will show you everything that you need to see. Now, there are times where there's things that are done in doubles or more than one. I'll only show you how to do one, and I'll go off camera and sew the other ones. And that's just to help with the time of the video, because they can get really long if I start showing you things in doubles or triples. It just makes it really long, and I don't feel you need to sit and watch me sew something a few times. You just see it once. You'll pause the video, go finish the other ones, and then come back and continue on. So that's something like handles or straps. I'll show you how to sew one. I'll go off and sew the other ones. But you do see everything. I do walk you through everything, and there's nothing that you're going to be missing. So if at any point you're finding that the tutorial is long, just hit the fast forward button or speed up the video so that it can go at the pace that you like, or just watch the parts that you feel you need. So now that I've got all my markings made, the other thing I did was I got all my hardware and zippers and everything all gathered. Now, I didn't really need to gather my hardware. I actually bought the kit from Emmeline Bags, which has everything I need to make this bag. So I actually bought that, so I have everything. I just didn't feel like digging through all my stash and trying to find all the pieces I needed. This was just a lot easier. Also, I didn't have this little metal frame for the edge of the flap. So you can see it here. This is what it looks like. This is metal frame. Oh, it just says nickel. It just says Bag of the Month Club. So this is the metal frame that is referred to in the pattern. That's the one you need. So you can refer to the pattern. Now, you don't need to use it, but I'm going to use it just so you can see how it looks on the bag. And I've already got all my zipper pulls and everything attached and my ribbon cut. And it's all in here just so I don't lose anything. I just like to keep it together. The other thing I've gone ahead and done is I folded some of my straps and my connectors and stuff, and I've pressed them already just so that I don't have to get up and pause the camera and go and do that off camera. There are times where I will have to pause the camera because I can't do measurements until things are constructed, but other than that, you will see me do everything. So let's get started making our buddy backpack. So the very first thing you'll need to do is, if you haven't already, is attach your interfacing. Another thing I wanted to make note of, I do mark what each pattern piece is on the back of my pattern piece, just so when we get to those steps, I know exactly what pattern piece I'm grabbing at. I don't have to worry about it. So that just helps make things a little bit easier. I've also put this pile in order of how we're going to construct the bag, except for the straps and that, they're on top just because they're easier there. So the first thing we're going to do is grab our main exterior B panel and one of our foam pieces. Now your foam will have a Decoville light fused to the center of it, so you'll see I've done that for both my foams. I have the Decoville light centered and fused to it, so you'll have that centered and done already. Now you're going to then take your exterior main panel B piece and you're going to center it over top of your foam and smooth it out. Now you can take this to your iron and smooth it out with your iron. I'm going to line up my marks. So I'm lining up those center marks just to make sure everything stays centered. Another thing you can do is you can use some 505 basting spray. That'll help hold it in place too while you sew this. So I'm going to clip it all the way around, making sure it's nice and taut. So just clipping it all the way around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to baste my panel to my foam, and once we have it basted to the foam, we'll then trim the foam out of the seam allowances. So when you're basting, you can use a longer stitch length because this is a stitch length that is not for structural purposes, it's just holding the foam in place. So you can use a longer stitch length for this, and you'll want to baste this in place using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So just go around the entire exterior. Take your time at those corners. Make sure you keep an even seam allowance. You don't want your stitching to be seen in the completed bag. grab my duckbill scissors, and first I'm going to trim these threads away. And we're going to trim the foam away from the exterior panel. So you'll want to pull it away from the exterior panel, and you just want to trim your foam, not the exterior panel. And that's why I'm using these duckbill scissors, because it'll hold my exterior fabric away from the foam, so it acts as a guard, and I don't accidentally cut that fabric. And these little threads that are fraying there, I'll cut those away. So you just keep cutting all the way around the entire panel. Be careful when you're cutting not to trim your stitches too. You don't want to go right on the stitches. You don't want to cut those. If you do, you can just simply re-stitch it. You're just cutting the foam. That's all you're cutting right now. And you can see I cut my foam a little too small when I was cutting it, so that's okay, because now it's already cut on this one edge. And the last edge. And that's it. That's how you trim the foam. I'm just going to put my scissors away, so that you have it so that the foam is not in your seam allowance. So you'll have all the foam trimmed away. You'll do that for the main panel, and then we'll put this to the side for now. Now you'll notice there's still one piece of foam that doesn't have anything attached to it, and that we will be doing later. We will not be attaching that yet. We'll attach that later. So put that to the side for now. And the other thing that's important is you may find it helpful to mark the center pieces. So I'm just going to grab one of my pieces here to mark the centers, so just like I've done here, of the bottom and top, but just so that it's easier when you go to construct the bag later. So mark that within the seam allowances if you haven't done that already. Now we need to create our lining pocket. And again, because I've read ahead, I already have the marking on my L1 interior zipper pocket facing. So I already have my little rectangle drawn here, so I don't need to draw that right now. If you don't have yours drawn already, go ahead and use your ruler and use the measurements given in the pattern to make that rectangle. Once you have that done, you need to grab your pins, and we're going to place this at the measurement given in the pattern. So the measurement that we're placing it at is from the top down, and there's a mark, as you can see, that I've made, and that's where the top edge of my zipper pocket, interior zip pocket facing L1 will go, and it's also going to be centered. Now, for me, when I find center marks, what I do is I fold my lining in half, I crease it, and then I fold this in half and crease it, and I line up those crease marks, which I've already got the crease marks made. This one's a little bit harder to see than it is on the... So I line up the center creases, and I know you're looking at this upside down, but the center creases are both here where my baby finger is, my pinky finger, so right there. So I've got the creases lined up, and the top edge of my L1 is in line with that mark I made on my panel. So I'm going to place some pins in. Making sure that it stays centered and that it stays in line with the mark I made. So I've got the pins in there. Now I'm going to stitch around that box that I created. Now I'm going to use a slightly shorter stitch length than I would when I'm stitching a bag together, but you can use the length that you like. And I'll start right in this corner, and I'm just going to stitch along. close that because I couldn't open it. And I'm just going to keep stitching along that entire edge of the box around that rectangle that I made. Now, if you're worried about skipped stitches in the corner or angled stitches, you can reduce your stitch length to 0, take one stitch length or one stitch, then pivot, stitch all the way to the next corner, and again with your needle down, reduce your stitch length to 0, return it back to the length you're using to stitch, turn the corner, and keep sewing until you get to that other corner. And that'll help prevent those skip stitches. Usually I just rock my needle. I use my hand wheel to move my needle back, or forward, sorry, just to make sure it catches. So there I am in that corner again. And as I was saying, when I usually use my hand wheel to move my needle, sometimes it catches, sometimes it doesn't. So I just like to go with the 0 stitch length. That ensures it catches every time and I don't have to worry about it. So there it is. I've stitched the rectangle. Now I just got to find my seam ripper. So now with your seam ripper, we need to cut a hole down the center of the zip pocket facing. And we need to cut triangles. So you can draw this if you want, draw a line down the center and then draw little triangles in the corner. I like to say it looks like a Y when you draw them on both ends. But I just go for it. I just cut. I'm a bit of a rebel. And be careful not to cut your stitches. If you do cut your stitches, not to worry. What you can do is, and I've done this many times, so say I've cut the stitches in this top corner up here. What I do is I come back a bit, I back stitch on top of the previous stitches, stitch all the way around into that corner, back down and around the bottom here, and I'll back stitch there. And that just not only reinforces the corners again, but it also makes sure that those stitches here that you've sewn previously don't come undone because you've back stitched over them, so it helps lock those in as well. So now we need to push the zip pocket facing into the back of the bag or the back of the lining. You need to push it through to the back, and then we need to press this. So we need to press it really, really well. You can use some steam, or what I like to do is I like to take my water bottle. I have an extra water bottle that I just use, and I spritz it on the back side as I'm pressing it through. So I'll press this through like this. So while I'm on this side here, I'll press it up. I'll press this up. I'll press these in. Then I'll push it through to the back. And then I'll press everything flat. And once I've done that, then I'll spray it and I'll press it again until the water that I've sprayed is dried. So I'm going to go do that, and then I will come back and we will continue on. All right, so I've given that a really good press, and as you can see, because I've used, like I said, the water, it makes it really flat. So I spray it with water and then I dry it with my iron, and that helps press it really flat. And then I sort of try to use a bit of water to remove the chalk. The chalk will remove as we construct the bag. I'm not too worried about that. So now we need to place this to the side for now, and we're going to work on creating that zipper pocket. So we need our L2 and L3 pieces, as well as our zipper pocket zipper. You think this is your treats, eh? Sounds like her treat bag. Right. Yeah. So what we're going to do is, yeah, shake a pocket, girl. We're going to, good girl. We're going to take L3 bottom. Now, I've written that this is the bottom and this is the top. And that is very important to have them labeled what is the bottom and top when we go to put this inside the bag, inside the zipper pocket facing opening. So you'll really want to make sure that you've labeled which one is the top and which one is the bottom. So we're taking L3 bottom and we're going to place the zipper in line with the top edge here of the L3 piece. So you're going to line it up, and you can use double-sided tape here if you want. You don't have to, but if you want, you can use some double-sided tape to help hold it in place, but I'm just going to pin it. I'm going to put her little sweater down that she likes to sleep on. Sorry about this, just she likes to lay on this when I sew on this table. So again, lining up that top raw edge of the zipper with the top edge of the fabric, so with the top edge of L3. Line it up. You've just come to say hi, eh, and check on what's going on. Okay. So I have it all pinned, and again, the zipper is going on that top edge, and your zipper is going to be right sides up, and the fabric is right sides up. And it may seem a bit wonky or a bit weird, but once we have it all constructed, you'll open the zipper, and the wrong side of the zipper is against the lining, so you'll be able to see inside the zipper pocket. Now we're going to baste this to the top, or stitch this to the top edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So if you've changed your stitch length from the length you like to use when stitching structural seams, change that back now. And once I get near where the zipper pull is, you'll notice that the zipper pull kind of causes this little bump. You'll want to zip the zipper out of the way. So lift your presser foot up, needle down, lift your presser foot up, and zip the zipper out of the way. And that'll help keep that whole area all nice and flat, all straight and even, and you won't get any wavy or wonky zippers. Didn't want her to go after my thread. Sometimes she likes to go at the thread on the machine. In case she comes back. So I have that one all stitched, that one side. I'm just pressing it, and I'm finger pressing it away from the zipper, away from L3. So just like that. So it's being pressed away from L3. So when you have it pressed, now the zipper is on the wrong side of the fabric. And again, we've attached this to the bottom piece. So we're not top stitching this at all. We're just pressing it, and I'm just finger pressing it. And if you have a seam roller, I always forget to use it because it's hanging on my card over here and I forget about it. But if you have a seam roller, you can use your seam roller, or you can even take this to your iron to press it. Now we need to grab the L2 piece, the top, and lay that so it is right sides up. And then we're going to place the zipper right sides up on top of the L2 piece, making sure you're lining up your side edges. And that top raw edge again of the zipper is going to line up with the top raw edge of L2. Now I cut my zipper a smidge longer, and that's why I'm making sure I'm lining up my side edges. I like to cut my zippers just a smidge longer just to make sure that I always have the right length. So it's just like that. So remember when I was saying when you open up the zipper pocket, you're going to have the zipper on the wrong side against the right side of the zipper pocket. So when you open up the zipper pocket, you're looking in at the right side of the bag. Again, stitch this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And don't forget to move that zipper pull out of your way when you approach it. Needle down, lift your presser foot up, slide the zipper pull out of the way. And again, you could be using double-sided tape here if you want. The choice is yours. If you don't have double-sided tape, another thing that works really well is a washable glue stick. So I just buy these at the dollar store, and I use a glue stick. Not always when I'm filming, because I try to follow what the designer has said and just to make it easier so I'm not getting up and down so much. But when I'm just sewing on my own, I'll use the glue stick and then dry it with my iron. And that's what I mean about getting up and down, because you don't want to stitch on top of the wet glue because it'll gum up your needle. So if you take it to your iron and press it, it'll dry the glue for you. So there you go. That's what it looks like. So we have top and bottom and zipper in the middle. So when you open up the zipper, so say this zipper pocket is closed, when you open up the zipper, you look in, you see the right sides of the fabric, or the pretty sides of the fabric. So I just keep pressing this to make sure it's nice and flat. So again, I've marked where my top is and where my bottom is. So now we're going to take some double-sided tape here. Just have to find the correct one. And we're going to place it along the top and the bottom edge here of the zipper. So along the long edges of the zipper, close to the edge of the zipper. Right along that edge. And I'm leaving it placed so that my top is at the top and my bottom is at the bottom. I'm not going to spin it around or anything. Try not to spin it around. I'll try to remember not to. And I like to create a little tab on the end when I'm using my double-sided tape. I just fold the tape back onto itself and I pull it back, and then I have a piece that doesn't have any tape on it at all here. And that just creates a little tab so that I can easily pull off the paper backing without any issues. So now we need to grab back that lining piece and we need to place it down on top of the zippers. And again, make sure your top is at the top and your bottom is at the bottom. This is very important because when we go to fold them together after to sew them, the top is longer to be able to adjust to the length of, or meet the length of the bottom. So place this centered, and you know it's centered because if you look here, see how my zipper facing is the same length as my zipper, or the same length as my panels. And I am using a number 5, not a number 3 zipper here, so your zipper may look a little bit smaller than mine. And that was just a personal preference, just so that my zipper can match, because I didn't have a nice blue zipper. And I'm pressing it down. Another thing I like to do is I like to pin the pocket so that it stays down and it doesn't end up coming up under where I'm stitching. And then I'll roll this one and clip it. And this just holds everything nice and flat, because now what I need to do is we need to stitch around this opening here. So you're stitching around the bottom of the opening, up the sides, up the top of the opening, and down the other side. If you don't want back stitching, because say you're using a fabric that's solid and you don't want back stitching, leave long thread tails at beginning, stitch all the way around, don't back stitch, stitch all the way around, and when you get back to where you started, stop in the same hole you started in, leave long thread tails, and then pull them through and tie them off in the back. And where my zipper pull is, again, I do the same thing. Needle down, lift my presser foot up, move my zipper pull out of the way, and then continue stitching along. And I just was where my zipper pull was, so I just moved it out of the way. And I'm using a busy fabric, so I'm not concerned about back stitching or anything. But if I was using a solid fabric or a zipper overlay here, I probably wouldn't backstitch. I'd usually pull the threads through to the back to tie them off. I'd use that method. So I've removed my clips, and that's how it looks when it's all stitched. I know you can't really see my stitches, but I went all the way around the box, and now it is attached onto the panel. Now, whoops, we're going to flip this to the wrong side. You're going to bring your top down to meet the bottom edge of L3. Clip the sides together. And then we're going to stitch up both the side edges of the pocket. And we're going to leave the bottom edge open because this is how we're going to turn the bag out later. And I just want to make sure that everything lines up nicely. So stitching the side edges using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And make sure you move your lining out of the way. You don't want to sew your lining. So see how I have my lining moved out of the way? I'm just sewing through the pockets only. And I'm going to back stitch at start and stop. And I start right up where the zipper is, right at the top. And I go all the way down the side. And I'm not too worried about trimming my threads here because there won't be peekaboo threads, being that this is inside the bag. You can test it out and see how there's the opening in the bottom here. That's what you want because we're going to be turning the bag right sides out through that. So we're going to put this panel to the side for now. We don't need it just yet. We're going to grab our K1 piece. I'm just trying to find it. And this is K1 here, and K1 is your slip pocket. So we need K1. You're going to fold this so that it is right sides together, and she gives the measurement in the pattern for what way to fold this, so you know you have it the right way. And I had already folded mine so I could see the crease when I was reading through. So pin it together. So it's going to be long and narrow-ish, I guess you could say. Long and narrow-ish. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew around the 3 open edges. However, you need to leave an opening in the bottom here to be able to turn this right sides out. So leave an opening, and if you feel you need to because you might forget, you can always mark it with a pen, just like that. Now, can you see where I made my 2 little marks? So you can leave the markings just like that so that you remember where to stop and start. So leave the little markings, sew up to them, back stitch, and then come back. Now I'm going to show you a little trick that I like to do when I'm stitching a bag together, or I'm stitching something like this. So I start stitching, and when I get to a corner, I back stitch, and that's just for extra security in the corners because we do poke those corners out. You gotta make sure. And I just back stitch in the corner just because I like to make sure that, again, we have the extra security. And then I back stitch here. And then what I do, instead of breaking my stitches, is I pivot this and turn it so I sew off the edge. So I'm going to show you. So see how I sewed off the edge? And that just makes it so that when I do that on both sides, it makes it so that this edge will turn nicely when we go to turn this right sides out and press it all together. So I'll do that on the other side. And again, you don't have to do this. This is just something I like to do for my own purposes. Stitch off the edge. And especially in those corners, again, you don't have to do that. That's just something that I like to do. So see that little opening there? Now I'm going to trim the corners. Careful not to trim my stitches. And then I'll turn this right sides out. I think I may have left the opening a bit not big enough. I'm just going to trim more of this bulk down. Turn it right sides out. So remember that opening that I left and how I stitched off the edge? See how it's forcing that opening to close with the rest of it at the same width or length? It just wants to automatically go that way, which is what I want. So now I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to give it a press, and then we'll come back and we will continue with attaching it to our panel. All right, so I've gone ahead and pressed this, and while I was off camera, I also made marks that I'm going to need to make in steps in just a bit. So I made those so I don't have to pause the camera again. Now what we need to do is top stitch the top folded edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So change your stitch length to the length you like to use for top stitching. Trim all your threads so you don't have peekaboo threads later. Oops, throwing that in the trash. There's threads stuck to it. All right, so it's all top stitched. Now we're going to take this and we're going to place it onto our lining panel. But before we do that, I'm going to pin my zipper pocket out of the way because we don't want to stitch through this at all. We're using that same panel we just attached our zipper pocket to. So once you have that pinned up, we're going to take the slip pocket and you're going to make a mark from the bottom of your panel up. And I've already made that mark. Here it is here. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Yeah, you can. And then we're going to center our slip pocket on the panel and line up the bottom of the slip pocket with that mark. So again, I fold it in half, create a crease, then I line up that crease with the center crease on my panel. Which, how funny is that? The one mark I made. There we go. Just like that. Line it up. Line up that bottom edge with the bottom edge of, with that mark you made. So the bottom edge of the slip pocket with the mark you made. Pin it in place. Ow. Be careful when you're using pins. As you just saw, I poked myself. That kind of hurts. All right, now we're going to stitch this so along the side, down the bottom, and up the other side. So stitch this in place. So I'll remove my first pin. And don't forget to change your stitch length back to the length you use when you're stitching a bag together. And make sure you backstitch really well at start and stop. Gets a lot of stress on the tops of pockets, so you want to make sure that you're really taking extra care to really reinforce them. So there it is. It's stitched in place. So I'm trimming my threads so I don't get peekaboo threads. So it's all stitched in place. So you can see it there. And I wanted to use the pink when I did this. When I was picking fabrics, I thought it would be fun to use pink because it'll really stand out on the lining, and also you'd be able to see it on camera better. So now I was mentioning when I went off camera, I made marks from the left-hand side over. You can do it from the right side as well. So there's 2 marks you need to make. So you can see I've already made them. It's sort of hard to see. There you go. You can see I've made them already. So now I'm going to stitch on those lines, and that's going to create the divided pocket. So you want to back stitch a couple times at the beginning. Stitch up the line. And then I back stitch again. And then lift your presser foot with your needle down, pivot your fabric, and stitch back down that mark you stitched up. So you're stitching right on top of your previous stitches. Trim my thread, and that'll really reinforce that pocket. I do the same for the other side. So stitch up the mark you made. Needle down, presser foot up, and back down the other side. And that really reinforces those pockets. So you can see how I divided them here. So I have these 2 smaller pockets and 1 larger pocket here. Nice little slip pockets. So we're going to again place this to the side. And I'm leaving my pocket clipped because we still need to add some stuff to this panel. Grab your K2. This is your bottle sleeve. And same thing, we're going to do the same thing we did with the slip pocket. Fold it in half so it's pretty sides touching. Use some clips. And we'll stitch this the same way we stitched the slip pocket, leaving that opening for turning it. Oh no, sorry, we're not doing that. You're just sewing along the bottom edge. Sorry. Kind of got ahead of myself there. So we're just sewing along the bottom edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. We're going to turn this right sides out. So again, I sewed along the bottom, turn right sides out. And I like to use my turning tool here to press my seam down. Now we need to take this to our iron and press it, but I'm just going to use my seam roller so that I don't have to get off camera. Just rolling this seam. There we go. So just press that seam. Now I'm going to top stitch both the top and bottom edge. So top stitch both long edges. Trim all your threads. Because we're avoiding those peekaboo threads, as I like to call them. So we have it top stitched, both the top and bottom. Now grab back that panel with the pocket and slip pocket. You're going to fold the bottle sleeve in half so these raw edges are aligned. So just like that. Clip it. And she gives a measurement for how big this will be. So if I measure it, it measures exactly the measurement that's given in the pattern. And we're going to baste the short side edges together. So these raw edges. So you can leave your stitch length at your top stitch length, as you're just basting it together. All right, so I have it basted together. Now we have this little tube. Now we need to place the bottle sleeve on top of the lining main panel with the zip and slip pocket. But you need to make a mark from the bottom of this corner here. So not from the bottom of the panel, the bottom of the corner up. And I've already done that. And I'm going to place the bottom of my pocket. Now you can choose whichever side, if you want the side where you can see that we stitched it together, or the folded edge. I like the folded edge to be the top, and I like this to be at the bottom. I'm placing it in line with this line I made here and lining up my raw edges. And then we'll baste this into the seam. You can just stitch right on top of those previous stitches that you made when you basted those short edges together. I feel like I can't get that there. That thread didn't want to be cut. Now, the other thing that's suggested is placing a pin to prevent movement during construction of the bag. So I'm just going to place a pin here, just like that, and that'll keep the water bottle, or bottle sleeve, sorry, in place so that it doesn't move during construction. So the pocket is unzipped. I'm going to remove these clips. So right now on this panel, we have this nice zipper pocket, a nice slip pocket, and a bottle sleeve, which will be in the side. It won't be stuck on this panel. When we sew the bag together, it'll be in the side of the bag, but that's nice. You have a nice options for some organization in your bag. Love to be organized. Now we're going to grab our pocket panel C, and that's this one here, and it's one of your linings. And you need to, if you haven't already, fuse your fleece to the wrong side of the lining pocket panel. And she gives a measurement for where to place it, how far over, how far down. So you'll want to do that now if you haven't already. I have. You can see there's my fleece. Then we need to grab our other pocket panel, and I used 2 linings for this. In the cutting chart, it was listed if you're using cork to cut one from exterior and one from lining. So I just did that. I cut one from my exterior, so I have my exterior one done, and then I have the 2 lining pieces done. So we're pinning these together at the top. Line up your center marks. And then we're going to sew the tops together using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now we need to take this to our iron, and we need to turn these so that they are right sides out and wrong sides touching. What I like to do first is take this seam here and press it open so that when I turn it, I can't get my fingers in there, so that when I turn this right sides out, this has a nice seam already pressed, and it'll press nicely at the top. So I'm going to go do that, and then I will come back and we will continue on with constructing our bag. So I've gone ahead and I've pressed the top of the panel, as I mentioned how I do that. And I also made the markings that are coming up in the next steps that we need to make for stitching this to our lining panel. So what we're going to do first is top stitch this. So top stitch across that top edge. And then what what we're going to do is take this and we're going to grab our remaining lining panel and we're going to place this so that it is right sides together with the lining. So the lining panel is against the lining panel, and we're going to match the bottom and side edges. So match everything up and clip it in place. So we have it all clipped in place, and now, like I said, we're going to sew the bottom and side edges so that this is all together. And you're basting within the seam allowance. So you can use a longer stitch length for this because, as I mentioned before, basting is just holding things together. Oops. As long as you stay within your seam allowance. Arm of my chair rubs on the table and it drives me nuts because it makes this like squeaky noise. So I'm just basting all the way around, same way that we did when we were basting our foam, if you remember, to the exterior main panel a bit ago. So I've basted that in place. I'll trim my threads just to make sure there's no peekaboo threads later. There we go. So now this is where you need to make those marks, which I've already gone ahead and done because I didn't want to have to stop the camera again after I just stopped it. So I've already made my marks, which you can see with the white lines that I've drawn on the panel. So I've made all my markings. So now with those markings, we're going to stitch across the bottom here, across the bottom, above the corner cutouts. So we're going to do that using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So we're top stitching. This is going to help divide that pocket up. And I did draw my stitch line at the bottom here just because I knew I wouldn't be able to see the measurement because the bottom here hangs over where my measurement is on my machine. So I've stitched across the bottom. Now we need to stitch up the sides at those marks that we made. So starting at the bottom, stitch up those sides. So I'm starting right where I start, where that stitch line is. And I'm going up the sides. And you're just stitching on top of all those lines that you made. Make sure you back stitch at start and stop. And then up this side line here. So you have both those lines on the sides stitched. Don't forget to back stitch at start and stop. So I've stitched from the edge over that first stitch line on both sides. Actually, you can see it on this better. So you can see I've stitched. Oh, you can't really. Oh, yeah, you can. You can see it. Now I'm going to stitch up the center of this one here on the left-hand side. And this is creating pen pockets. However, However, you'll notice that this is a really long pocket, so she does have a marking that you can stitch across so that the pen doesn't fall in. So you'll see here, if I put my pen in, there's a mark right there. You can see the white mark, and that'll stop my pen from going any further into, because you don't want your pen going all the way down here. Don't forget to backstitch. For some reason that one thread didn't want to cut. So I've backstitched at start and stop as well, and I'm going to cut all my threads because I didn't do that with all of them. And now you'll see here, I can hook my pen on, or I can just slide it in, but it won't go any further because that stitch line. Now, if you want to make it extra secure, we can stitch over it a second time, which is what I'm going to do now, just to really make sure it's really good. You don't want to have your stitches break or anything when you're using your pocket. So now you have the pocket just like that. So you have two pen pockets here. Just trying to get my hand. Two pen pockets here, a big slip pocket here, and then a long slip pocket here. And you can do the same thing on this side if you want. You can cut it and stitch like we did here, so it's not as long down depending on what you want to put into this pocket. So if you have something that's going to be longer that you want to put in there, so maybe I will do that just to make it so that it is a shorter pocket. I'm going to fold it, and then I'll know where to make that mark. So I'm just going to fold it because that might be good for me to put sunglasses in and not lose them in the bottom of my bag, or whoever is going to get this bag. So now that pocket, don't have to worry about anything falling deeply into the pocket. It just goes, that's as far as it can go. So same thing on this side. Now we have two pockets, so something can fit in there, a pack of gum, anything will fit in there, and I don't have to worry about it going all the way to the bottom because that would be hard for me to reach. So now we're going to place this panel to the side and we're going to move on. We need to grab out our ribbon and also the hardware, the little swivel hook. All right. Oh, still need to cut this open. Dropping everything. All right, so we're going to thread the ribbon through the hook on the hardware on the swivel hook here, just like that. So you have it folded. Just want to make sure. Then we're going to use, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to fold it in half. Sorry, I got you all confused. So fold your ribbon in half, slide your swivel hook on, clip it, and then we're going to thread this through just like that. So I'll show you again. So you've got these folded in half, just like that. You've threaded your swivel hook through, and you have this loop on this end here. You're going to feed your clipped end. Can't show you this way. You're going to feed this clipped end through the ribbon here, through the loop, just like that. And that's going to hold your swivel hook just like that. So I'll do that one more time. It's a little bit tricky. So fold it in half, clip it, feed your swivel hook hardware, feed the ribbon through the swivel clip hardware. Then you have this loop here. you're going to take this end that you've clipped together and put it inside the loop. So just like that. And then pull it through the loop just like this. And I just pull it tight. Pull it to secure it. Now I'm going to leave that clip that I just took. Now we want to take the ribbon and place it with lining main panel B, so the one we just worked on. And this is good for your keys too, this pocket, so if you didn't divide it, or even if you did, your keys will just sit in nicely just in there like that. If you did divide it, you can use it for something else as well. I won't use it for my keys. I'll just have my keys hanging because I know I'll pull them in and out because of my scooter key. I need it constantly. My scooter key is too big to fit in here. So I will just have my keys hanging like this inside. But you need to place this on the panel over from the right-hand side. So I know the measurement here. So we're going to place it at that mark given in the panel from the right-hand side. So placing it on the panel using the mark given in the pattern. And then we're going to stitch it in place. And decide which way you want facing out. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's going to get moved around when you're using it. And then we're going to secure this within the seam allowance. Just back stitch over it. I like this idea of using a ribbon for this. And you can tuck this in for now just so that it stays out of the way. But you see, you can use this, so if you didn't divide it, and even if you did, you'll see your keys will still fit in there. I'm going to clip this over here so that it doesn't get in the way during construction. Just like that. So I've clipped it over just like that so that it stays out of the way during construction and it doesn't dangle. I don't want to hit it when I'm sewing. So that's why that pocket is longer, but I divided it because I can use it for something else. So like I have an EpiPen. I could put an EpiPen in here. I can fit my asthma inhaler in here, and I can just leave my keys hang out. But my keys will still fit in this pocket as well. So it's clipped out of the way, and she does mention clipping it out of the way for construction or keeping it in the pocket. So we're going to put this off to the side and continue on. Oh, actually, we need both lining main panels. So grab the lining main panel that you just worked on and place the lining main panel with the zipper pocket, bottle sleeve, and everything else on top, lining up the edges. So match up all the edges and pin it together. And then we're going to sew this together using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And you'll want to pay extra attention because the seam allowance is a little bit different on our lining. So you'll want to pay extra attention to the instructions to see how that is going to be sewn. So I'm just clipping my side edges, and as I mentioned, my water bottle pocket is pinned out of the way so I won't sew it, and my key clasp there is also pinned or clipped out of the way, not pinned, it's just clipped over. So now we're going to sew these again using the seam allowance, but pay special attention to the instructions because the seam allowance is not the same. So there's one side edge. I'm going to sew the other side edge. ran out of bobbin thread. Perfect timing. Right at the end of this. Of course, it's literally like right at the end here. So I'm going to go line my bobbin thread. I'll finish sewing that. I'm going to press these seams open, and then we will come back and we will continue on. All right, so my bobbin is refilled and I have finished sewing that bottom edge. I also pressed these open. Now, because of the shape of the bag, it's a little bit tricky. So what I do is I lay it flat. I press this one side over. Then I take this, flip it over, and with this edge that I just pressed turned under, I turn the other one like this, and I press it all the way down. Now, because this is a bit thicker here, it's a little bit harder on that side, but you can see here, I just did this and pressed it. Another thing I like to do is stitch the top here to help keep these pressed open, and that helps with bulk later when we're sewing the bag together. It helps reduce the bulk. We already have interfacing cut out of seam allowances and everything, but this is just one more step that I like to have so that my seams stay nice and open and they don't end up facing the same way when we go to construct the bag in the final steps. So now we need to finish the lining. So we need to take the side seam. I'm just trying to get my fingers. So just put your fingers inside and pull it open. And you'll take these seams of the side and the seam of the bottom and you'll line them up. And again, that's where having those seams pressed open really helps because you're reducing bulk. You'll do that on both sides. So just open it up. Put the seams together. Line up those seams, the side seam and the bottom seam. So it's one seam. Pin it. I don't know where that went. Oh, it's right here. And then we will sew across the bottom using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Just make sure your seams stay pressed open as you're sewing. And if you want for added security, you can always stitch over that again another time. Usually I'll do that when it's the exterior of the bag, not so much with the lining. Now, if you're finding that your machine is having a bit of a hard time going over that bulk, switch to a bigger needle, try a humper jumper, and also use a hammer, and you can flatten those seams to get them, oops, I just poked myself, flatten those seams to get them really pressed nice and flat. So that's just a couple of tricks you can use to really help get in those over these seams. So again, switch to a bigger needle, that always helps, and use a humper jumper as well as hammering those seams to really flatten them. So now we have the exterior or the lining of the bag is completed. As you can see, we have the corners. It's hard to see in there. Oh, you can see in there. So we have our pockets and everything. We've got our zipper pocket open and we still have the key clipped and we still have the pocket, the water bottle pocket clipped to the side. But we can actually take that out now because that's not going to affect anything anymore. But do keep your key clipped in place. So we'll put this to the side for now. We don't need this at this moment, so we'll just put it off to the side. We're going to work on our flap. So for the flap, we need the lining piece. So the piece that is going to be your lining. And you want it to be wrong sides up or right sides up. You can do wrong side or right side, but for now I'm marking the snap placement so you can see my mark for the snap placement. So I'm going to grab out my magnetic snap. Don't have to cut yet. So we need a washer. So grab out one of your washers. And the center of the snap is where you're going to place it with that mark you made. So I've made that mark, so that's where my mark is. I'm going to take the center of my washer and line it up with that mark and then draw the lines I've made, or draw the lines with the prong markings. Grab my seam ripper. So again, it's centered on that mark I made. Now, if you're worried about cutting too far, here's a little trick. Place your pin, so stop that from rolling. So you can see my marks right there and right there. I go in at the top, so I'll show you what I mean. In at the top and out through the top of the other line. You can see my pin goes in through the top and out through the top of the other line. And what that's going to do is that's going to stop me from ripping any further than where that pin is. So that pin, as you can see as I'm pushing, is acting as a barrier. It's acting as a guard. So you can't push any further than that. Now we need some fray stop. So I'm going to remove my pin and I'm going to put some fray stop on my marks, or on those slits that I made. This is coming out really quickly. There we go. And then you need to install the, I just want to see, male half, one of the male halves. And another thing I like to do is add a piece of interfacing behind, just for some extra strength and security. There we go. And my pliers. So you push it through. The magnetic snap is going to be on the right side and the prongs will come through on the wrong side. Push it through, place your interfacing, and then your magnetic snap. Now, if you're using a different magnetic snap, maybe you're using one that screws together or gets pressed together with a press, follow your manufacturer's instructions for installing your magnetic snap. You really should anytime, even with the snaps like I'm using. This is just the method that I've used. So what you just saw me there was pushing the prongs. So I like to fold my prongs so they hug my fabric. Personal preference, but you can have them folding out. Now I'm going to place some tape. Just placing some tape over the prongs. I have another piece of tape that I can use after. Now another thing that we have to do is draw your seam allowances all the way around, so down the side edge, across the bottoms, and up the other side edge on all the edges. That'll just help make sure we have an accurate seam allowance when we go to attach our panel, our lining to our exterior. Now, we didn't attach our foam, and I need to do that, so I'm going to do that now the same way I did it when I attached my foam to my exterior. So I'm just going to line up my center marks, and I'm going to quickly sew my foam all the way around, and then I will cut the foam out of the seam allowances after so that it's not in my seam allowances. So I'm going to do this off camera because I don't feel you need to sit and watch me do this. So I'm going to go off camera and sew this in, baste it to the foam to the exterior panel. So I will go off camera and I will go baste this foam to my exterior, and then I'll come back and we will continue on. All right, so I've got the foam basted to the flap exterior. Now we can take the two flaps and place them so they are pretty sides touching. So I'm going to line up the top corners, line up the center marks. Line everything up. And remember, we drew our seam allowance on, so you're going to stitch right on top of that seam allowance, right on those marks. Now you're not stitching on the top edge here, we're leaving that open, and that'll help us turn the flap right sides out. I do clip the top just to make sure it stays nicely together. So change your stitch length back to the length you use when you're stitching a bag together. And you're just sewing directly on top of that seam allowance you drew. And you can back stitch in this corner like I do for other pockets and such where I'm turning corners. Now this little curve here, you'll want to take it one stitch at a time. So needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot a bit, and do that all the way around. So needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot a bit, and keep going until you come all the way around and you can go straight back up that next edge. Turn the corner, keep stitching straight up. Now, another thing you can do is trim the foam out of this area here. So I'm going to do that before I even turn it right sides out because I'm just going to help remove the bulk here. You could probably try it, turn the flap right sides out and then try it first and see if that foam is too much there for your hardware to fit. I'm just going to go with this right now so that I don't have to turn it so much because that makes it really hard on my hands. So I'm just trimming it down where this edge is, and this is where that metal trim will go. So I'm just trimming it away. You can actually take it and measure how far up I will need to go. All I'm doing is cutting the foam away. That's what you're seeing me do right now, is I'm just trimming this foam away. Just away from where the edge will be, that metal edge. Almost. Perfect. So the foam is trimmed away, and that'll just help it so that it's not as thick there when I turn that right side out. Now the other thing you can do is clip the corners and trim the curve. And I'm using pinking shears to do the curve. And I just trimmed basically where I cut for that metal edge to go. And there's my corners all trimmed. Now I'm going to turn this right sides out. And I will have to go to my iron to press this, but I'm going to press it from the lining side. And I'm going to be very careful when I'm pressing because I do have that magnetic snap and I don't want to hit it with my iron. I'll trim those corners. I didn't want to do this because it's harder on my hands. I forgot to trim these corners. So just trimming these corners here. Make sure you don't cut your stitches. Poke out your corners carefully. And then I'll take this to my iron, as I mentioned, and I will press it flat. And I'm just checking to see that this is okay. Once I press it nice and flat, I'll be able to get this on. Now you don't have to use this metal edge trim here if you don't want. Yeah, I'll have to press that really flat and get that in there. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to press my edge really flat, and then I'm going to attach my hardware. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this in to the frame channel. So you're sliding it into the frame's channel, and I'm going to use a little bit of glue too inside the frame channel. Slide it on, make sure it's nice and centered, and then you'll use the screws to screw it in place. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll come right back. All right, so I've got that all pressed. Now we need to top stitch before we add that metal edge frame. And I made sure that it fit. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, but that's okay. And what I also did was I hammered the seam allowance so that it flattened it a bit more, just to really make it so that I could get that frame inside the flap inside the channel of the frame. Making sure everything stays nicely lined up. There we go. Now I'm going to top stitch this all the way around, and you can also base the top edge of the flap. So that's the side I'm going to start on. Dropping clips everywhere. Don't want it in the garbage. The top stitching will help compress the fabrics as well, making it easier to fit that frame on your bag, on your flap. And again, I'm just taking my time around. My presser foot keeps coming off. I don't think I'm tightening that enough. There we go. So that's all top stitched. We have a beautiful top stitched flap. Now, again, you don't need to add the frame. I'm going to, so I'm going to show you how I add it. So grab out my tools. I'm going to put these screws on here. I'm just going to find what screwdriver fits best. They're really little, so they're really hard to grab. Yeah, that one. So now again, remember I was saying the top stitching would compress it a bit. So you can see that that goes in really nicely and easily, but I'm going to use a bit of glue, and this is just extra precaution. I always like to add a little bit of glue. Right along inside the channel of the frame. Now the back side is the side with the screws holes, and that's the side that you want to be on the lining, and you want the side without the screw holes to be on the front. So the flat side is on the front and the screw holes are on the back. Now if you want, you can use a flathead screwdriver to really help push this in. Just like that. And remember that glue is going to help hold this in place as well. So grab one of the screws. You know what I'm going to do? Extra precaution. I'm going to add a dab of glue in those spots where those screws are going. And that'll help hold the screw in place as well. Screws are so little, it's getting hard for my hands to grab them. There we go. And the nice thing about these screws is they're pointed, so you don't have to create holes first. They just cut into the fabric as you're screwing them in. And any extra glue that's on the frame, I just wipe away. It just comes right off, which is great. So they're pointed and they cut in to the fabric. And this little tool set my husband picked up for me at the dollar store because I was complaining that the screwdrivers that I did have, I couldn't screw in the little screws anymore. Some of them seemed too small for the screwdriver that I was using. So he found this little set and picked it up for me at the dollar store. Wipe that glue off after. All right. Can use a little bit of rubbing alcohol after, or Windex or whatever, to remove the glue as well. Why isn't this one wanting to screw in? There we go. And I have some extra screws, and that's okay. I'll keep these. I like to keep all the extra screws just in case, say, I get some hardware and there wasn't enough screws with it. I keep all these little extra screws just for that purpose. So I'm just going to put them in here for now. Just until I'm done the tutorial. And then I'll put them away after. So there's that extra glue. Just want to, oh, got a glue web. So I will take some rubbing alcohol, not rubbing alcohol, the alcohol wipes that I have, and I'll wipe that down after to remove any of the glue. But that's how the frame looks when you've attached it to your panel. So pretty. It just adds a little bit of extra bling to the panel. And again, your magnetic snap is also on the panel. So we're going to place the flap to the side as well with the lining, and we're going to move on with creating our strap tabs and our short handle. So moving right along, we're going to grab our strap tabs, and I've placed mine in groups with what they're going to be used with, just so that I could keep everything together. So you have 4 of these strap tabs, as you can see here, and I've already folded mine. I had folded mine off camera so that I didn't have to go off camera to do it. But what you need to do is draw a line down the entire length of the strap in the center, or the tab, sorry, in the center, And then you're going to fold the raw edges in to meet in the center just like that. So you'll have raw edges in the center, and on the other side you'll have none. And you'll do that with all 4. Now, what I like to do is press them into the center, spritz it with some water like I mentioned for the zipper pocket facing, and then I press them really flat so I get a really nice flat press and really nice flat strap tab. So once we do that, then we need to top stitch the long edges of all these strap tabs. So top stitch all 4. And I'm just chain stitching them together, and I'll cut them apart after. Start on the next side and down that side. So again, both long edges are being stitched together. So now I'm just going to cut them apart. So as I mentioned, I chain stitched them together and then cut any threads. All right, so now I have some marks on some of these that I made, and I just want to see which ones I'm using now. So these ones are going to go over here and these ones here. So now what we need to do is we need to take these strap tabs and we need to grab our hardware. So we need 2 sliders and 2 rectangle rings. So here's my 2 sliders. Here's my 2 rectangle rings. And what you're going to do is you're going to take one of the strap tabs and feed it through the rectangle ring. So just like this. So when you're feeding it through, you want the side with the raw edges to be together so that you don't see them. Place a clip. Repeat that. And the other thing is there's always a seam on the rectangle ring. I like that to be enclosed as well. Just a personal preference. I just like how it looks when you have a nice finished rectangle ring. So there's 2 with the rectangle rings. Now you need to take the slider and you need to fold 2 strap tabs through this center bar of the slider. So again, the folded edges, so the raw edges are going to be in the center. So bring it up over the center bar, just like that. And align the raw edges, just like that, and do that, and do that on both of those strap tabs. So again, you're looping it through the center bar. So it's holding there with the center bar. How many times can I say center bar? So just like that. Now we're going to stitch as close to these rings. So on this one, we'll stitch as near to the center bar as we can. And on this one, we'll stitch as close to the bar as we can there. So I'm going to change my presser foot to my zipper foot. Of course, I just typed this, and now I'm removing it. So again, we're going to sew as close to the bar or the hardware as we can. So with the rectangle ring, sew as close to the hardware as you can without stitching or hitting it. So I always put my presser foot down, then my needle down, and that gives me a gauge for how far I am if I fit. So if the presser foot fits there, without any resistance or anything. There's 2. And now this one is going to be a little bit trickier because you can't really get close to that center slider, but you can get close to the bar of your slider. So move the slider like this, and you'll sew right against this bar here. And make sure your strap tab is nice and flat. Just hold that slider. So I'm going to go really slow because I need to hold that slider because it will shift on me. So you'll see, it's hard to see the stitching, but you can see it. Oh yeah, you can see it there, and it's right against, whoops, that went right against that bar. Repeat that for the other side. So again, hold the slider, put your presser foot down. And now we're going to trim all our threads. We don't want any peekaboo threads later, and especially here. So trimming all my threads, cutting them all away. Oops, I see a thread here. So I've got all my threads cut away. Now I'm going to change my presser foot back to my regular foot. So I'm going back to my regular foot, which I just threw on the ground. My hands are not cooperating today. Thankfully, I have this telescopic magnet that I don't have to get off my chair to go grab anything. So switching back to my regular presser foot, now we're going to continue. So now we need to grab our short-handled J piece. And I just want to make sure I have the correct one. So I'm just going to clip these together. These, just so I don't get them mixed up. So just want to make sure this is my short-handled J. Yes, it is. So the same thing with your short-handled J. You're going to draw a line down the entire length of the strap in the center, and then you're going to fold them the same way we did with the strap tabs here. So you're going to do that exact same thing and then press it. And the same thing, I like to press with my water bottle first, spray with my water bottle, and then press it that way so that it gets a nice, really nice crisp press. So the two straps that we need right now are the ones that have the swivel hooks attached, or not swivel hooks, sliders, sorry. And we're going to take the rectangle rings and we're going to slide. So you're going to move the center bar up and you're going to slide the J through it. So you want the raw edge of J against your table, slider like this, slide it through just like that. So there's one side. So you'll see these loose ends of the strap tabs are on top as well as the middle bar. Now you need to mirror that on the other side. So again, hold it so that the middle bar is against the top and slide the strap tab or the strap through, so strap J, and they'll meet in the middle. So they're just like that. They meet in the middle. So you have your, you know what I'm going to do? I want to hide that inside. So I have those seams hidden inside later. So that's how it looks. So you have the tops. So you see how I have these two tops here on top, and it's through the center. Now we're going to take this and we're going to open each short end of handle J, and we're going to clip them together, making sure you don't twist the strap. So that's why I just grabbed both ends and brought them up. Clip them together. And then we're going to sew them to form a loop. So you're going to sew these together using the seam allowance in the pattern, and you're going to form a loop here. Very interesting technique that we're doing here. So make sure your stitch length is at the length you like using for structural seams. Now Now we're going to press this seam open. And then we're going to refold everything back into the center, just like that. And I'm going to put a clip there because now it's a little bit thicker in that area. And then we're going to flatten, the short handle. My things got turned. I gotta turn them around. You're going to flatten the short handle, and you want to make sure that your strap tabs are on the outside, but you want to flatten the short handle, and you want the seam in the middle bottom. So I know that's where my seam is. That's where the middle is, so I'm going to just fold it, find the middle, and bring it up as close to the middle as you can. Clip it together. Another thing is you can use some double-sided tape here if you want. But you see how I don't have that seam of the slider? You know how the slider has the seam in the bar where it's connected? I have that tucked in between these layers right now. So we're going to match everything up, add some clips, and then we're going to sew this. Now I'm going to have to switch back to my regular foot, back to my zipper foot. I didn't realize, totally forgot that I needed to stitch this. And again, one strap slider with the strap tab is at each end. So you have one at each end. So you got to make sure they're at each end. And let's see. You know what? It'll be okay to use that foot. So one at each end, and it's folded just like that. So I'm going to start at the end closest to the hardware. Press her foot down. Just like that. Use a slightly longer stitch length. Now, here is where it gets a little bit tricky because my hardware is there. So what I do is I turn so that I'm going backwards now until I'm just far enough that my presser foot won't be on top of my hardware. And that just helps me keep a nice even seam and I don't get wonky stitches. And I'm going to sew all the way to the other end. And then press her foot down. And again, I just rocked my needle so that I can make sure that I don't get angled stitches in that corner. Back stitched at the top again. Now you can back stitch if you want a more balanced look at the other end as well, which, you know what, maybe I'll go back and I'll do that for a balanced look on both ends. Although, yeah, you can't really tell. I can't really tell, so it's okay because I used a darker thread. I'll do it anyways. There we go. Now I have a balanced look. Both ends were back stitched on. Also adds that little bit of extra security. All right, so that's how that looks. So we've top stitched the middle here, so it's all held together, and our seam where we attached J together is in the center there, and our two swivel hooks are on each end, just like that. So now they're going to be put to the side, just for now, and on these ones, with the D-rings attached, there is a mark you need to make, and you can barely see it on mine, so I'm just going to retrace over it. This one stayed pretty good, but the other one didn't. So grab your G bottom connectors. That's these pieces. And I just want to see, it's saying, okay, so then with the handle connectors, so you're going to take these and place them, and I've got lots of, sorry, I just had to read that there, what was being said. I don't want to give you any wrong information. And on this, she actually instructs us to make a mark and measure, and that's where you stop sewing. I just went up as close to my hardware as I could, which probably ends up being almost that exact measurement that was given. So you do want to make that mark. Sorry about that. Now on these ones, there is a mark that you make from the bottom down, and that is where you're going to have the overhang. So I've made that mark. Can't see it on that one. You can see it better on that one. You're going to take G, you're going to place it so it is right sides up, and you're going to place the connector on top of this, but there's a mark that you need to make, or a measurement for how far from the center you're going to press this. So there's my center. I'm just folding it in half, and there's that mark that I made. Excuse me, all the dust. And there's the mark that I made, and that's where you're going to place the strap connector or strap tab, as well as at that mark that you made on the strap tab. So it has to hang off the edge and line up with that mark you made on both connectors. So it hangs off the edge and it lines up with that mark. So just like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to baste. Oh, no, sorry. What we're going to do is fold the connector over. Sorry, I'm reading a different one. Fold the connector over. So fold it in half. You could baste those in place so that they don't move on you if you want. And then we're going to sew across that top straight edge, making sure that connector stays at that mark, and sew using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And another thing to note is your hardware will be hanging down off the corner like that. So down out the bottom. So out the bottom where the corner is here, where you have that triangle. Oh, I need to put my stitch length back. So there's one. And another thing, if you want for extra security, is you can stitch back over where the strap tab is, back stitch over it. So if you've basted it to help hold it in place, you have that holding it. But then this also adds some extra security there as well. Trim all your threads. Now, she has us snip into the side seam here, but not the stitches, just into the side seam. So I'm just doing that, clipping away. And then we're going to turn this right sides out and use our turning tool to poke out the corners. So I've snipped into the seam on the side on the folded edge there. You can see it there. See how I snipped into that? And that just helps when you're pressing this or turning this right sides out. And I poke the corner out so you get a really nice crisp corner. And now I'm going to take this over to my iron, and I'm going to give this a really good press with my iron, making sure everything's nicely pressed, and then I'll come back and we will top stitch everything.
So I've given these a really good press. Now it's time to top stitch them. So we're going to top stitch right across here, this top edge where the strap tab is. You're just top stitching along that edge. My machine, oh, my light is off, not my machine. So across the edge where the tab is. And then we'll trim our threads. Just like that. And that's how it looks when it's top stitched. Now in the pattern, she has it that if you wish, you can add rivets. I'm going to go off camera and add these rivets now, and then I'll come back and we will continue on with adding everything to our panels. So you're just going to add some rivets on the strap tab and on the connector, and as well on your strap here that we created with the J and the other strap tabs with the swivel hooks. So you'll put a rivet here, and then 2 rivets on J as well. So I'm going to go off camera because I don't feel you need to watch me do that. If you don't have rivets, that's okay. You don't need to use them. You could use Chicago screws if you don't have either of those. Another little option is to add a little extra bit of stitching. So what you can do is create a box inside the strap tab here, and then sew an X inside the box, and then you can make a little box down here because you can feel where the strap tab ends, so it ends right here, and you can create a little box there as well with an X in it too. And you could do the same thing on here, just make a little box on these and then put an X in them as well. So just a little bit of extra security and hold to make sure that it just adds some extra strength. If you want to, you don't have to, but that is definitely an option. So I'm going to go add my rivets, and then I'll come back and we will continue on with our bag. All right, so the rivets are all installed. As you can see, I've put rivets exactly where it shows in the pattern. And there's no measurement, so you can just sort of place them wherever you feel you want them placed. So that's what I did. So I'm just going to place these off to the side for now. We need to grab our flap. So this piece here that we created with the little piece of hardware. Now, if you remember, I was saying I use an alcohol pad, something from my first aid kit, to wipe off the excess glue that gets on the frame from when I'm trying to glue in those screws and everything. So this is what they look like. I just buy these from Walmart, and they're supposed to be for first aid kits, but I have them down here as well for any cleanup. So if I get a little bit of oil on my machine when I'm oiling it before I sew, I just use one of these to wipe it up, and then I use a dry cloth to dry it. But it gets the glue off any hardware really nicely, so that's what I use. I just have a stash of them down here so that I can always have them handy when I need to remove any glue, especially if I get a little bit of glue on my hands too, like I'll use that. You can also use hand sanitizer. I have used that a little bit before and rubbed it on and taken it off, but I find those work really well. So with our flap, we need to take this and we need to place the exterior side up. So this is the exterior side here. And we need to grab our short-handled J, and we need to put it on top with the strap sliders facing the right side up. So this is the right side of the strap slider here. So you'll see that the middle bar, you can see your strap connector, or strap tab, sorry, going over it. So just like this, you want it to be this way. So if yours looks like this, that's the right side up. And you're going to place these onto your flap using the measurement given in the pattern. And it's measured from the center over, and I forgot to make those marks while I'm off, so I'll have to pause the camera again. I'm very sorry. Pause the camera again, make those marks, and come back. And there's also a measurement for how far the strap tab will hang off the edge of your flap. So you'll want to make that mark on your strap tab and the mark from the center of the flap over, and there's the measurement given in the pattern, so you'll want to do that. So I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to go do that quickly and come right back. Okay, measurements are all made. Now we are ready to place our strap J onto our flap. And again, remember, you want them to be right sides up, so that's how it'll look. You'll see it'll look like this. So you can see my middle bar here. This is the right side up. If yours looks like this, where it's going over the bar, the strap tab is going over the slider bar, that is incorrect. You want it to be facing up like this. So now what we're going to do is use our clips, and we're going to clip it in place at these marks that we made, and also hanging off the edge at the mark we made on the strap tab. So there's my mark here. You can see it here. There's one of the marks. So I'm going to place the strap tab at that mark and also hanging off the edge of the flap at the mark I made on the strap tab. So I'll show you in a second, as soon as I get this all pinned, how it'll look. I just want to make sure it's nice and straight. So that's how it looks. So there's my mark right here, and my strap tab is to the right here of this mark. So on this side I'll have it to the left of the mark, but it lines up right with the mark. So now with your flap flat and your strap flat on your table, oh, mine shifted a little bit. What you're going to do is you're going to take your strap and, making sure it's not twisted, bring it up and over to the other mark. And then again, line up that mark on the top of your strap tab, or on your strap tab, with the mark, or with the top of the flap. So it's overhanging. So you'll see it's overhanging like that. And my strap isn't twisted. It comes from one side right over. So make sure that that's not twisted. You want to ensure it's not twisted. Take the time to do that. Now that we have that pinned, what we can do is we can baste this into place. And using a basting stitch, again, you can use a longer stitch length or your regular stitch length. The choice is really yours. And I've just back stitched, as you've heard, a couple times. Cut all our threads. We don't want those peekaboo threads. And then what I'm going to do, because she does suggest in the pattern to pin it so that it doesn't lose its shape, not shape, but it doesn't change the angle during construction. You can tape this down or pin it down, but I can't pin it because I've got this faux leather here, or vinyl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some painter's tape, and I'm going to tape them down, making sure they stay nice and straight. And I'm taping them so that they're away from, the tape is away from where I'm going to be sewing. I don't want to sew through it. And even if I did, it's painter's tape, I can pull it away. But just some tape, just to help hold it in place. And this is just to help keep these straight, nice and straight, and I'm making sure it stays nicely lined up with that line as I tape it. So it's just like that. So it's held in place. So that's not going to move or flip up or anything on me. So now I have that nice and straight, and I like the painter's tape because it's safe, and when I pull it off, it won't damage my material. Now, if you are going to use tape, I do recommend taking a scrap of whatever material you're using and putting some tape on it, pressing it down, leaving it for a little bit, and then come back and pull it off. This is a suggestion because I've had vinyls where I've put painter's tape on it before, and same thing where I've left it during construction, and then I come back and I peel off my tape and it peels off some of the shimmer or whatever else is on the vinyl. And I discovered this years ago, and I just decided, you know what, every time I do this to a bag before I use that vinyl, I will test it out first and see how it reacts when you leave the tape on. So that is just a suggestion. You don't want to cause any damage, especially to your flap where it's on the exterior, where you're going to be seeing it on the bag later. Luckily, where the tape was on that bag all those years ago, it was somewhere where it was going to be sort of at the bottom and in the seam almost, so I was able to just sort of cover it up, and it wasn't able to be seen after, thankfully. And it was for me, the bag, so I wasn't too concerned. So now that we have that done, we need to grab our pocket panel C. So I'm going to find it here. So we need our pocket panel C, our exterior pocket panel C. Where is it? So this one here. So we have this exterior pocket panel C, and we need to place this right sides up, and we need to place our flap so it is exterior sides down. So they're going to be pretty sides touching. So your exterior side of your flap is going to be touching the exterior side or right side of your C panel. Now we're going to place these so that the centers match and the raw edges line up. So lining up your centers. pin it together. And again, make sure it's exterior of the flap against the exterior side of the C panel. You want to make sure you have that oriented in that correct position or correct way, because then when we go to close the bag later with the flap, if you have the flap turned the other way, the magnetic snap won't catch and you'll have your handles and everything on the inside as well. So it'll look just like that. So you can see this is the lining side of my flap. This is the exterior, my handle, and then my C panel. So we've kind of created this handle J sandwich here in the middle. So now what we need to do is we need to baste this. So I'm going to baste this in place just to help hold it. I know this isn't in the instructions, but I just want to hold it in place. I don't want anything shifting on me because there is this handle here which kind of pulls a bit on your flap, you'll notice. So I'm just going to baste it. This is just an extra step for some security. And I saw some threads I forgot to trim earlier. Now that I have that basted, what I now need to do, and I feel like I have to keep looking over my glasses because I have my readers on, but my computer's too far. Now what I have to do is we're going to take one of our hidden pocket E pieces. So it's going to look like this. It looks like this funny looking T. So we're going to take this and we're going to place it so it is right sides down on top of the flap. So now we're going to have a flap sandwich. So this is going to be, the hidden pocket E is going to be right sides down, lining up our centers. Again, all our center marks aligned. And then we're going to pin it in place. So you have it right sides together with the flap lining. Then when you lift up the flap lining, it's the flap exterior and then the C panel exterior. So you have this like flap sandwich right now. That's a funny word. So make sure you're lining everything up. The side edges and the centers. All right, so now that that's pinned, and again, we have this little flap sandwich, so E is pretty sides touching the lining side of my flap right now. We're going to sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern, and we're just sewing across this top straight edge here, and we're sewing through all the layers. So use the seam allowance that's given in the pattern. And you may want to use, if you have it, a humper jumper. I don't have a humper jumper, I don't use it. I should really invest in one to try one, but you may want to use a humper jumper just to help get over the bulk if your machine is struggling. Now I'm just sewing a second row of stitches here just because I feel like I sort of went off a little bit. Just a wee bit. And I also just feel that it secures that flap a little bit more. I should have did it over here. There we go. So there we go. Now I'm going to trim my threads. Remove these clips. Now what we need to do is we need to open the seam allowance facing the panel pocket. So we're going to bring this so that it comes up and it goes down, all of it goes down towards the panel pocket. So I have this up. So if you look at the underside here of my panel, you can see that my strap tabs are sticking out. I have the underside of the E and the flap, and then I bring this down so that all that bulk is under this C panel here. Now you can take this to your iron and give it a really good press. However, because I have this vinyl here on the flap, I don't want to do that. So I'm just finger pressing this right across, because now what we need to do is we need to top stitch on this C panel all the way across here, and that'll help hold all this bulk down, and it'll help hold this nice as well. So increase your stitch length to the favorite length you use for top stitching and stitch right across that seam. And we're stitching through all that bulk, all the layers. And again, if you have to, use a humper jumper or try a bigger needle. Sometimes a walking foot helps. You can also hammer the seams to flatten them. The needle that's in my machine, I started out with this needle. I'm using 116 because I knew that there would be a little bit of bulk, and I just figured that rather than trying to change my needle halfway through sewing with you, I just start with that needle right away. So there it is. That's what it looks like when it is all stitched. Now we need to put this to the side for now. Leave this taped here just in case. Just leave it for now. It's okay. It's not going to hurt it. So leave that, but put this off to the side. Now we're going to grab our remaining hidden pocket E and our upper back D piece. Now, if you haven't already, do mark the centers on these right now. And to do that, what you can do is just fold these directly in half and it'll create a crease. And then you'll be able to mark your centers as I did. So what we need to do is we need to take this, have upper back D, right sides up. You're going to take your hidden E pocket and you're going to line it up with the bottom straight edge of your upper back D. So decide which way you want this to face when your bag is constructed. So mine's not really a directional print, but if you have a directional print, right now you're going to be looking at it with it upside down because you want the bottom. So say this was the right way and this is the top. I'm going to bring the top and flip it around because I want to attach this to the bottom of my upper back D. I hope that makes sense. So say this is the top, because this is a directional fabric, I'm going to spin it around. My top is now here and the bottom is now here at the top. So with it on the bottom, and I don't really have a directional print, but I guess I kind of do because see how my butterflies there kind of go the one way. So I think I want them to be like that, these orange ones here and these blue ones facing up. So I'm going to flip it around. So see that? See how they're now facing the wrong way? And I'm going to take this E piece and I'm going to line it up with the centers and clip it in place all the way along. And then we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I feel like my E is just a little bit too big, but I will trim that down after. I think this one, when I cut it, I wasn't very accurate with cutting, and that's okay. So now we're going to sew this top straight edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Oops, don't forget to turn your stitch length back to the length you used for stitching. Now what we're going to do is flip this so that they are wrong sides together. So what I'll do is the same thing I've done before where I press this seam open and then I will press this to the wrong side. So I'm going to go do that now and then I will come back and we will continue on. All right, so I've pressed this the way I said I would. So I pressed the seam open, then I pressed it up towards the D. Now you may be wondering why it's going up and not down, and that just helps reduce the bulk because on this one we have it pressed down. So when we put them together, you don't have all the bulk going in the same direction. So now that that's pressed, again, it goes, all the layers go up towards the D. We're going to top stitch this. So use your favorite top stitch length and top stitch straight across on top of the upper back D panel. Trim your threads. problem with using a dark thread on a dark fabric is it's harder to see. So there it is. I have it top stitched straight across. Now what we need to do is place this piece so that it is right sides up. So this is your C and D, and then we need to grab the panel with E, C, and F, and we need to place it so it is right sides down. But we're going to place it so that the flap and C are up, because all we want right now is just the two hidden pockets right sides together. So your hidden pocket E's are pretty sides touching, and we're going to line everything up on the hidden pockets. You're not doing anything with the flap or D or the C piece, just the two hidden pockets. Clip them together all the way around the edges. There we go. Line everything up on the sides and the tops, and line her a bit off. It's hard because you've got the weight of the flap pulling on things. There we go. And then just continue clipping all the way around. And then when we sew this, we're going to sew just E. So just the E's together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew E. So I'm going to turn it this way so you can see it better. Put this clip here. So you're going to come down the side of E over here, down the side, across this little edge here, down the long side, across the bottom, up the side, across this little bottom edge, and up this other side. You're not sewing through anything else. You're just sewing through the E layers. So ensure your stitch length is at the length you use for structural seams. And you're using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And remember, when you pivot those corners, make sure your needle is down. It's caught on my microphone. I don't want it pulling my microphone off. So I'm stitching across the bottom now, and then I'm going to come up this other side, and I just keep checking as I'm turning corners to make sure that I have an accurate seam allowance. And I gotta hold this all because it's going to pull on my microphone. And there you have it. So I've sewed the short sides here across this short bottom, down the long side, across the long bottom, up the long side, across this short bottom here, and up this short side edge. Now, what we need to do is smooth this down over the E pocket, just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to then repeat the same process that we did when we attached our foam to our front piece that we did earlier. So I'm going to go off camera because I don't feel you need to sit and watch me attach it the way we attached the foam in step 2. So I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to go attach this, and then I'll come back and we'll be able to continue on. Just one thing I wanted to note before I continue on. When you're attaching your foam to this panel that we've just created, make sure you flip your flap down when you're stitching up the side, up the top here. You don't want to stitch through the flap, so bring it down out of your way when you're stitching here. Just wanted to mention that because I don't want you to leave it flipped up and then stitch through the flap. It has to be brought down. So I'm going to go stitch this, cut my foam out of my seam allowance, and then I'll come back and we'll continue. All right, so the foam is now attached to this panel. This is now going to be known as the main panel B. So this is our main panel B. We need to take our connectors, and I just have to find them, I dropped one. So these connectors here, so the bottom connector G pieces that have our strap tabs on them, these pieces here that we created previously. So you see them here with the little triangles on them. We need to take these and we need to place them on the bottom of this panel here. And there's a measurement from the bottom up for where you're going to place them. So you'll want to refer to the pattern for that. And I had marked this before I'd even started my bag because I knew that these were marks that I could make because nothing would change here. So the bottom point of the cutout or of the connector G will be in line with that mark you make or made. So you'll place it like this. I'm just going to turn this around. I'll work with this side first. So you want the raw edge to be in line with the raw edge on the side of the panel, and the bottom corner here will be in line with that mark you made right here. So it lines up with that mark. We're going to clip it in place. I've lined up the raw edges, and if you have those raw edges aligned, your strap connector will, or strap tab will be facing upwards. So again, on this side, I'm lining up this bottom corner with that mark I made, and the raw edges are aligned. So just like that. So they're both attached. So again, they both point, as you can see here, they both point up towards the center. Raw edges are aligned, and the bottom corner of my connector G is aligned with that mark I made. And this one looks like it might be needing to be shifted up a bit. Maybe it was okay. But those raw edges are aligned, and now we need to baste these in place. So baste them within that seam allowance. And again, you can use a longer stitch length for basting. I'm just going to use my regular stitch length because I put that back when I finished stitching the foam to this panel. So trim your threads. There we go. So now they're basted in place. So you kind of have it looking like this. If you flip them out, flip them in just like that. And now we need to prepare the main panel. So we need to punch some holes for the purse feet, and we need to punch some holes for the female half of the magnetic snaps. So there are some measurements that you need to make for the purse feet from the bottom corners up. So from these bottom corners up and into the side. So you'll want to use that. And another thing, anytime you punch holes in any quilting cotton, and sometimes even with vinyls and other materials, I still do it, but you'll want to apply some seam sealant. So I use Fray Stop. So you'll want to apply that. That'll just help seal those holes from fraying even more over time. You don't want them to fray while there's a rivet or a purse foot or something in there. So you'll want to do that. The other thing you need to do is install the female halves of the smaller magnetic snaps. So you'll want to install those through all the layers, and that is on the upper back of D, and then you'll repeat that for the front exterior main panel. So this is your front exterior main panel. So you'll repeat that for the purse feet on here, and you'll repeat the markings for the magnetic snaps, but you'll be placing the males here. And the other thing you need to do, again, there's a measurement from the top down into the middle of the center here, where we're going to place the magnetic snap here that's going to go here. So this is the male half. You need to place the female half on this panel. So you'll want to, again, purse feet marks from the bottom corners, so from these bottoms up and over from the side of the cutout. Magnetic snaps on D and at the top of this from the side and down. So from this top edge down and the side over, there's a mark you'll make. So you'll do that on this panel. On the main panel here, the front panel, again, marks for the purse feet from the sides over and up. You'll make that mark. And then on this one, you'll also make a mark for the magnetic snaps as well on here and at the top. So go ahead and go do that and install all those snaps and everything. I don't feel you need to see me do a magnetic snap because you've already watched me install this magnetic snap here, and I have to make all my marks and measurements. So I'm going to do that off camera. I'm going to install everything, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how it looks in case you need to see. There is also a mark you'll need to make on the bottom here for where your label is going to go if you're using a bag label. So you'll want to also measure and make that mark and then install that as well. So you're installing your purse feet, all your magnetic snaps, and your bag label. So this is a little bit of time-consuming work to get these all done. You're not installing the bag feet, sorry. What you're doing is you're just making the marks and making slits in it. So you'll just put your bag foot down and you'll draw with the washer where the slits are. You'll cut the slits. We install those later, so don't install the purse feet yet. Just make the marks and make the slits for where they're going to go, and don't forget to install to use some Fray Stop or Fray Tech on it. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll come back and I'll show you how it all looks. Okay, so I've installed all the magnetic snaps and I've made the holes for the purse feet. So I didn't install the purse feet. This here is my other cat. This is Missy. You don't really see her because she's a little bit more shy. But this is my other girl, Missy Bear, I call her. So I've made the holes again for the purse feet. So as you can see, I didn't install them. So I've cut all the holes and I've put some Fray Stop on them to keep them from fraying. Installed the magnetic snap centered here, my bag label, and also the male halves of the magnetic snaps on this main panel here. And on this main panel, the back, which I'm going to call the back because I forget what it's called. I think it's main panel B. Again, purse feet holes. And I also installed the female halves of the magnetic snaps on top of the upper D. And the other thing I did was I installed the rivets here on the bottom where the strap tabs are. So you can see there's some rivets there. I installed those just because I like having that extra security for that strap. So I've installed those there. So again, don't install your purse feet, just cut the holes and leave it. So that's what that one looks like with the two snaps. And I realized I made a boo-boo. I used the wrong magnetic snap on my flap. I used one of the smaller ones. Thankfully in my stash I have more small ones, so I just used the small ones here. So now I have a large snap for any other time I need it. That was my little boo-boo, but it still works. And when you place, whoop, it's going to be loud. When you place these two panels together, this excited me. Look at how nice it's starting to look. You can already see the bag coming to life. I love it. It's such a beautiful design. So we're going to place this to the side for now, both these panels together off to the side with where your lining is. And if you can believe it, we're actually almost done, which is really exciting. So now we need to create our strap. I've already created one. I was off camera. I figured I'd get this done, so I only had to do one and I didn't have to stop again. So here's how it's going to look when it's done. So this technique is a little bit different than the technique that I normally use, which I will link that below in the description. But what you're going to do is, again, the same thing we did with those strap tabs. You're going to draw a line down the entire length of the strap in the center. So you can see I have a center line there. Then you're going to take the long raw edges and fold or press them into the center. Now, a little tip, I don't fold them directly touching in the center. I fold them so that there's just that little gap in the center. And the reason for that is when I go and press them again in half, so you have it like this, there's not all this extra bulk here in your side fold here. So that's just a way to prevent it. It still ends up finishing the same size, but you just don't have all that bulk, and it might not look as nice with that in that center fold there. So again, center line down the middle, fold the long raw edges in to meet that center line, but leave a slight gap, then fold it again in half, and that's how you enclose all those long raw edges. If you're using something like a vinyl, cork, faux leather, something that you can't press with your iron, what you'll do is you'll draw that line still, but then you'll put double-sided tape on either side of the line. You'll just fold your edges into the center, and then you'll fold it again. And that double-sided tape will help hold these long raw edges in the center. And when you fold it again, you can use some double-sided tape if you want to hold it, or just use clips if you want to help hold that. But remember the way we're doing the strap here, and the way I do it normally, I have tried it with cork, faux leather and all that, and it still works. So this method will work for this as well. So what you're going to do is, we have it all folded like this. You're going to open it up so you're seeing the middle raw edges. Then you're going to fold it back onto itself so it looks like this. So open up your fold, you see the raw edges, fold it back onto yourself so it looks like this. So can you see? So get it all folded, make sure those short edges are lined up. And then we're going to sew across this short edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. I just have to make sure that my stitch length was at the right length. And you're going to do this on both edges. So again, open up what you folded and press it back onto itself. So you're exposing those raw edges again, but you'll see it's like magic. And as I said, this is a little bit different than I usually do, but the method, it still provides the same outcome. Now what we need to do is take our scissors and we need to trim this top raw edge here, and you're going to trim them on an angle, but don't cut your stitches. So just like that. So you end up with like a triangle sort of at the top. You end up with like a peak. It looks like the top of a house. So trim those away. Then take this, so you have it like this, and you're going to flip it so that the right side is out and the wrong sides go in, and use your poking tool or turning tool to turn it and push those edges out. And see how you get a nice corner, because we've trimmed those corners down. You get a nice corner and no raw edges. So again, there's that peak. Try to put it this way. I'm going to push this right sides out, use my turning tool to poke out my corner, and then add a clip, just like that. So now we have two nice finished edges, and it looks like a beautiful strap. So I'm going to just add some clips all the way down, just to really help hold this. Again, you can use double-sided tape if you want. So now I'm going to sew all the edges all the way around the strap using the seam allowance given in the pattern, and you'll want to repeat this for the second strap as well. So starting on your short edge, I like to back stitch, come down all the way around and back down to the other edge, back stitch, start back at the edge you started at and come back down the other edge. And that'll help prevent twisting. However, for me, I'm just gonna go all the way around. Then I'm going to take this to my iron, and what I'll do is I'll iron it to press it flat. So this one here, because I've had it resting on something and it wasn't laid flat for a while, but it's sort of starting to twist again. So after I press it with the iron, I leave it so that it's flat for a while to really help hold it in place. So I'm going to go do that and come back, and then we'll top stitch this. All right, so I've repressed that strap. I just wanted you to see how it looked. So see how it's nice and flat now? There's no curve, no twisting, no nothing. So what I did was I pressed it and I left it flat to dry, and I let it cool while it was on my ironing board. So I didn't move it, because what happens is when I move it, which is what happened here while it was still warm, it'll twist again, or not twist again, but it'll sort of warp out of shape. I don't know how to explain it, but it makes it so that it's not flat anymore. So now I have a nice flat strap. So when I'm done top stitching this one with you, I'll do the same thing with this strap so that it's nice and flat, and I just press it from both sides. The other thing you can do is use a bit of steam. Sometimes I'll spritz it with a bit of water, and that'll help it if it's really twisted. Unfortunately, you can't really do this with vinyls or stuff that you can't press with your iron. You could put a pressing sheet between your iron and that material, and that'll help you be able to do it, but I wouldn't press for as long, just sort of go along nice and lightly and not hold it for so long. But make sure that the key is to make sure you leave it flat until it cools so that it doesn't twist again, or if you have it on something like this, it's going to end up taking that shape and sort of twisting again. So that's just how it looks once it's pressed. It's a nice, beautiful, straight, flat strap. So now we're going to top stitch this one. And as I said, start at the top, come all the way down, back stitch, break your stitches, come back up here and go all the way back down. And that just helps prevent twisting, especially if you're using a material like a faux leather or a vinyl or cork, something like that. It'll just prevent twisting. I'm just going to stitch all the way around because, as I mentioned, I can go and press my strap after. And my top stitch length for this is not quite my regular top stitch length. It's sort of in between my top stitch length and my length I use for structural seams. Now you'll notice that you get twisting because the two materials are shifting and they're not staying together flat, and that's what causes that twisting in your strap, because the pieces that you have folded together, the edges here, they don't stay quite lined up. Double-sided tape will really help prevent that as well, because it helps hold everything nicely in place for you. So if you have double-sided tape, I definitely recommend using it because it will help keep your strap nicely together and help with that twisting that you get. And again, that's just because the two fabrics are shifting. They're not feeding together at the same time. So to prevent that shifting, double-sided tape is your best friend. And I often use double-sided tape for my straps, but for this one, oops, for this one I didn't. So trim your threads, cut them all away, and then I'll show you how my strap looks, because it's going to be twisted for sure. So see how it's all twisted? You can see it's all twisted, and this one's all nice and flat. So now I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to spritz it with a bit of water, just a little bit, and I'm going to press it flat, and I'll leave it cool to dry, and then I'll come back and continue on. Now I'll have to leave it cool for a little bit so you won't notice, but the camera will be paused long enough for this to be able to cool, because I don't want to move it and have it twisted again. Sometimes it's not such a big deal because we're putting it on a bag, but you can kind of see the twisting marks or twisting within the strap itself. So I just like to press it flat and get rid of all of that. So you see this looks really nice and pressed. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll come back and we'll continue on. All right, so the strap is now pressed nice and flat. I am ready to now add the hardware. So you'll grab your slider, the remaining two, so I have two of them left, and you're going to do the same thing we did with the strap tab. Feed it through, and you're going to go over the bar, and there's a measurement in the pattern for how far over the bar you're going to go. So you'll want to make that mark from the end of your strap. So you'll see I did it on this one. You'll want to make that mark on the end of your strap, just on one end, and then place the slider center bar at that mark. So just like that. So the mark is hidden under there. Again, up through the slider, over the center bar, and the center bar I'm lining up with that mark I made. Oops, I'm going backwards here. I'm lining it up with that mark I made, just like that, and then fold it over and clip it in place. We can now sew this to hold it in place. And the other thing is you can add a rivet as well. I'm not going to add the rivet now. I will do that later when we're not on camera. I don't want to have to pause the camera again. So I'm just going to stitch over this. Oops, I kind of went a little bit wonky there. That's okay, I'll just fill it in. There we go, I filled it in so it's not as noticeable. So I'm just trimming all these threads right now. So there's one, and now I'll stitch the other one. So again, stitching it in place. Trying to get my thread to go back. And I backstitch a couple times just to really help secure it. Now, because I am going to use a rivet later, normally I wouldn't have backstitched that much, but just in case I forget to add the rivets. And that's how it looks when it's stitched in place, both of them. So they're both stitched in place right here, right across. And again, you can add a rivet right here, and I'll do that later. I'm not going to do that now because I really don't want to have to pause the camera again. So now we need to take these straps and we need to thread them through, the connector G and the strap tabs that are connected to them. So what you're going to do is you're going to thread it so the strap sliders come back out over this edge here. So I'm just looking at how it is in the pattern. I just want to make sure I tell you how to do this right. So you're going to have the strap connector or the strap slider facing right sides up. You're going to feed this through the strap connector here. So again, my slider is still right sides up. And then we're going to feed this loose end up through the slider, over the center bar, back down. So it'll look like this. And then we're going to connect it. And I'm just going to keep that tape. We're going to connect it to the ring up here, just like that. And you'll use the measurement given in the pattern for where to place them. So this is going to be the same mark, and I didn't mark it, so I'm just going to do this off camera here, because I have a ruler hanging here that you can't see. So there's that one. And the other one I will mark. There we go. So I did some quick markings. Another thing I'm going to do is wipe off this chalk here. So again, the loose end of the strap slider here, and at that mark that I made, again, I want that bar to be right at that mark. Clip it in place, just like that. So it looks like this. So your strap slider is facing up and it's looped through. So one more time, strap slider facing up. So you want your strap slider facing up like this. Loop it through your rectangle ring. So pull it through. So rectangle ring is flat like right now. The strap slider is right sides up. So all the way down, and then I'm going to go up through the strap slider. So you're going, it's through the bottom where it's closest to the panel. Pull it, then go through the slider, over the middle bar, just like that, and then bring it up, making sure it's not twisted. So you'll want to check after to make sure they're not twisted before you sew it. There's a mark we made on this. You're going to line this up with that mark we made. So there it is. Can't really see it. It's a little bit hard to see because the chalk is sort of wiped off. But making sure it's at that mark. Clip it in place, and then we'll stitch this. And this is where I'll go off camera and I'll install those rivets so that I don't have to worry about it later. But for now, I'm going to sew these in place. Just like that on the one, and then on the second one, same thing. I'll sew it in place. And I'll clip my threads. We don't want those. And then what I'm going to do now is, this is where I will stop the camera. I didn't want to stop it once and then have to go and stop it again for this. I'll pause the camera and I'll come back. Oh, hi, buddy. I'll come back and we will continue with constructing the bag. So I'm going to add rivets to my straps. And as I was saying, before you stitch them, make sure they're not twisted. You don't want them twisted when you go to wear them as a backpack. So you want to make sure they're not twisted. You want to make sure they're nice and flat. So I'm going to go add my rivets, and then I'll come back and we will be in the final stages of constructing the bag. We'll sew our zipper in, we'll construct the bag, and we'll be done. All right, so I've installed those rivets in the strap as I mentioned I would. So here's one rivet here, and then, oh, I lost where the other rivet was, right here at the top. So right here at the tops and right here inside the strap. So I've gone ahead and done that. Now we are ready to continue with sewing our exterior. So keep this piece on the table, keep it right sides up, place the other exterior on top, right sides down, so they're going to be pretty sides touching. Pin them together. So I'll pin the tops. And then we're going to pin the bottoms together. And if you have your center marks, line up your center marks first. You can line up your sides first too if you want. I always usually line up the centers first, but sometimes depending on what I'm doing, I'll line up the sides then the centers. So there it is. Now we're going to sew just the bottom edge together. And you'll sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Ensure that your stitch length is at the length you use for stitching your bags together. And you'll notice I never tell you what stitch length to use, and that's just because I know different machines, the stitch lengths are often different. So my industrial, say my 3mm stitch length here, but is one length, but on my industrial for some reason there's a slight difference. So I never give stitch lengths just to avoid that discrepancy. So now we need to take this, and I have to go off camera again because I need to press this seam open. So we're going to press this nice and open, and then when I come back, we'll top stitch on either side of that seam. So I'm going to go do that, and then I'll come back and we will top stitch. All right, so the seam is pressed open. Now, you may find if you've used some duct tape here that your iron gets kind of close, so just really avoid touching that because you will melt it, and that way there you don't cause any damage or anything to your iron. But give this a really good press. You can use a bit of steam if you want to help press it open, really nice and flat. So now when we flip it over, we need to top stitch on both sides of this seam. And because this is such a big panel that we're going to have in the throat of our machine, I'm going to roll mine up. So don't forget to back stitch. Make sure everything stays nice and flat. You may find it easier if you have an extension table for your machine to use that. It'll help hold the bag up for you while you're stitching. So I'm going to roll this side, keeping the straps out of the way. And while you're stitching this, you can take your hand and put it underneath when you stop stitching and just feel that that seam is open. I can feel from this side that it's open. I can feel a little lump there. There we are. And that's how the seam looks. I don't know if you can see it. I'm trying to see the camera. That's how the seam looks when it's top stitched. There it is. So you can see I've top stitched on both sides, and it's not any better on this side. You can't see it. So I've top stitched on both sides of that seam to press it open and help give it a nice flat area. Now we're going to put this to the side for now. Oh no, not put it to the side for now. There's also a mark you need to make on the top edge of the exterior main panel B. So you want to do that on main panel B, and then you will then move on to your zipper. So I'm going to just pause quickly, make those marks, and then come back and we will move on to our zipper. I know I keep pausing, but as I said, I don't like to show rulers or anything on camera. So the nice thing about pausing is you don't know how long I'm gone. It just goes right into the next step. So I'm just going to go make those marks and be right back. All right, so I've made those marks on the panel Bs. So you make them in from, I'll show you on this one, from the side edges over. So here's the mark here and here's the mark there. You can see them on both edges. And I've also done it on the opposite side. And those markings are going to be for the zipper placement. So we're just going to put this to the side for now. And we need to grab our zipper. Now, if you don't already have your pull attached, please do that now so that you have it attached like this. And I do have a helpful tutorial on my YouTube channel that shows you how to install your zipper pull. Now, on the end of the zipper, you're going to open it up. So the open end of the zipper, you will open it up just like that. So you have your zipper pull on it, and then the end here is still closed. You're going to fold this back at an angle. So you're going to take this, and again, I do have the tutorial on my YouTube channel for how to do this, but you're pinching this. So pinch it backwards and then fold it over. So you pinch the zipper tape back onto itself, just like that. And then you take this where the teeth are and you bring it up so that the fold is under the teeth, just like this. So there's the fold. I'm trying to get as close as I can. So there's the fold, there's the teeth. I'm going to bring them, so I'm still holding the tape here, so that it goes like that. And it lines up. I make sure it lines up with the side edge. So I'm just going to use a pin here to hold it in place. Now you can hand stitch this. I'm going to machine stitch it. So I'm going to do that on the other side, back onto itself, and then fold. And if you have another method that you find is easier for doing this, definitely go ahead and use that method. This is just the way I do it. I find it easy for me this way. Now, when I'm stitching this, I start with my needle down inside the zipper. I stitch, back stitch, and then I'll hand crank where that needle is, then remove the needle. So I hand crank over the needle, and then I just keep stitching. And this way here, the zipper doesn't shift on me. And it doesn't matter if you do this on the right side or the wrong side of the zipper. It really, truly doesn't matter. So here I'm starting on the side where the pin is, so I'm just going to stitch over it. That held it in place. And that just holds the edge of the zipper all nicely in place. Now I'm going to cut all my threads. If it shifts a little on you, don't worry too much. It's going to be hidden within the seam anyway, so nobody's ever going to see it. But that's how it'll look when it's done. So this side kind of has like a little triangle. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah, you can kind of see it. A little triangle on the back side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew across this edge so my zipper doesn't come off that edge. And I'm just creating a stop. So I've just back stitched over it a few times. Return my stitch length back to my regular length because that was still at my top stitch length. Now we have our zipper all done. Now what we need to do is take your exterior and we're going to place it so the exterior is right sides up. Grab some of your basting tape or double-sided tape, and you're going to place a piece in between those lines. So I always fold my tape back onto itself and then I pull it up because it sticks to itself when you do that, and then it creates a little tab. So I'm putting it right along the top edge here. Then I'm going to pull the paper off and I'm going to line up my edge of my zipper tape. So this is where you need to decide which way you want your bag to open and close when you're wearing it. So I know you wear it on a back, but sometimes we wear it on one shoulder. So I'll put it on my right shoulder. So when I'm wearing it on my right shoulder, I want it to close from this side. I want it to go from the left to the right when I'm looking at it, or right to left when I'm looking at it like this. If you're looking at it from the back, it goes from left to right. So right now I want it to go from open side on the right. So I'm going to line up the edge of my zipper here with this first line. And whatever way you want to wear your backpack when you wear it on one shoulder or when you take it off. So when you take it off and you have it on a counter, oh, the double-sided tape is sticking to my nail. When you take it off and you put it, say, on a counter or whatever when you're making a purchase, however you want your zipper to open is the way you want to place it. So if you want it to open the other way, have it going the other way. I'm going to add a clip there because the tape is, you know what, I'm going to add some more tape because the tape stuck to my nail. I find when I'm done tutorials, my nail polish is off in a lot of places. It's kind of funny, so I'm sure it's from the double-sided tape pulling at it. So I'm just going to put a couple of clips just for some extra security along the top. A couple, more like a few. There we go. So now what we need to do is we need to stitch across the zipper tape. I just want to read just to make sure. Yeah, so we want to stitch, we're just basting using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Sorry, I just wanted to really make sure I was telling you the right thing. And the other thing is make sure you stop at those marks. So this here, I'm just transferring the mark over to my zipper tape so I can see it. That's where I'm going to stop. So I'm going to do that, and we're just basting it. So with a basting stitch, again, you can use a longer stitch length if you want. I've changed my stitch length back to the length I use when sewing, so I'm just going to leave that. And you'll notice that the zipper pull is way out of the way, so it's not going to be in our way while we're sewing, so we don't have to worry about moving it or anything like that. And also because of how we've cut the foam out of the seam allowance, right now all you're sewing through is the zip tape and the exterior and interfacing, if you put interfacing, a woven interfacing on the back of your fabric first. So now we have to repeat that for the second side. And what I like to do is zip my zipper up to ensure that it doesn't end up twisted. If it does end up twisted, you can just unpick the stitches on this end and fix everything. But the safest way to prevent that is I zip it up. Then I'm going to add some tape again, just in between those marks. And then stick the zipper tape, so I'll open it a little bit, and I'll get it stuck down along the edge, so lining up that the teeth at the edge with that first mark, and I'm going to place a clip, and then I'm going to unzip my zipper the rest of the way, and then I can continue placing it down, pushing it against the tape so that the tape helps hold it in place. And the double-sided tape is really helpful because it'll ensure that nothing shifts on you while you're sewing. And the other thing too, a trick for zippers, if you're worried about keeping an even seam allowance, you can actually draw your seam allowance on the zipper tape and stitch right on the seam allowance, right along that line that you drew, and that'll help keep it nice and even, and it avoids those wavy zippers that we sometimes get. Another thing that you can do is press your zipper before you put it in your bag, and that'll help give it that nice not starched feeling, but it'll make it so that it doesn't get wavy. I don't know how to explain it. It removes any of the waves. And I thought I was out of bobbin because for some reason the back stitch on this side didn't stick. So I'm gonna have to go back and back stitch that after. So I'm just gonna back stitch over here again. I think I just started and I never back stitched because it's coming undone. There we go. That'll just lock in those stitches. All right, so on the other side, so again, you can press it with your iron and that'll take out the waviness. If there is ever any waviness, you can draw your seam allowance on. Also using a zipper foot will help you as well. You just want to make sure you have an accurate seam allowance, and I like to start with a zipper that's pressed. I often will press it. You just don't see me doing that on camera because it's all in my preparation steps. If you have a starch spray that you can use, you can starch it too, spray it with a little bit of that. I have a flatter spray, and sometimes I'll spray my zippers with that just to help press them. I mean, sometimes zippers can be buggers and we'll still get those wavy zippers. They just like to be a bugger, and there's nothing we can do about it. Once the bag is filled, honestly, no one ever knows. So I'm just trimming any threads here. That was really weird. So now that we have that done, you can install your zip end. I usually like to wait till the end, but I'll do this now just because it's the order of the tutorial. So we need all our little tools. So this is a metal zip end. And again, this came in the kit. You can buy the kit and you don't have to worry about anything. You'll have everything you need to make your bag. So I like to use a bit of glue inside the channel of the zip end. And the only reason why is because if your screw for some reason comes out, oops, I just dropped that. If your screw for some reason comes out, I find the glue just adds that extra security. I don't have to worry about the zip end falling off. I've actually installed these zip ends on a pouch and purse before, and then I decided to do a test and see if I can get them off after they've been glued, and I can't. So I glue them all the time now because that doesn't come off at all, and for some reason this doesn't want to go into the channel. There we go. Excuse me. So I'll use my flat screwdriver to push the zipper in, just to really make sure it goes in. Now the other thing, usually why I wait, is because sometimes I like to cut my zipper tail a little bit shorter than what's in the pattern, although I usually do like a longer zipper tail, but sometimes I like it a little bit shorter if I know the person I'm making this bag for likes a shorter zipper tail. So I will wait till the end to install it, see how it looks and how much it hangs, and then go from there. So that's something you can also do too, is wait to install it. So now I'm just putting in the screw, if my hands will cooperate, which they're not cooperating. Okay, and I know it's hard to see what I'm doing, but now I'm just screwing this in. Why does this seem like it's a really long screw for this? Like it's not going any further. Yeah, this screw is too long. Oh, that's so weird. That screw is way too long. So I had those screws, if you remember, that I kept in here. Right there. I'm going to just use one of these. That was so weird. It did not fit. I was fighting and fighting and fighting with it, but it wouldn't go in. This might be too small of a screw now though. I think I have extra screws in my kit over there, but for now we'll just use this. Oh no, this works. Yeah, that works. Awesome. Yay! Perfect. Those screws, those extra screws were handy to have, but that other screw was just way too long. I don't know why. All right, so there it is. So you want the shaped side to be on the same side as your zipper teeth, just like that. And then the screw is on the back side, so the wrong side of the zipper tape. And right now, when we close it, you're looking at the wrong side of the zipper tape. Next, we need to match the side edges. So make sure everything is tucked in. Get your zipper tape tucked in. And pin the side edges all the way down. It's such a big bag. Normally I would try to stand up to do this, but there's been a lot of up and down and it's starting to wear on me. So I'm going to open my zipper just a little bit to keep the pull out of the way because it is a dangly pull. And by dangly, I mean it's long and it can end up in the seam and I don't want that. Oh, there's a clip there too. Make sure everything is flat, everything is out of the way. You don't want to sew through any hardware or have anything stuck in the seam that shouldn't be there. All right. There we have it. So these sides are now clipped. So now we're going to sew the sides using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And again, just make sure everything is out of the way. Everything, including your zipper tail. Presser foot has slid out of my way. I can't reach it. There we go. So all the way down these side seams using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now, just a suggestion. Where the side G connectors are, or the G connectors, we're going to stitch over that again, over that area, just for extra security. So I've stitched over them a second time, just that area. I just want to ensure that that area has that nice extra strength. And rather than back stitching over them, I just would rather go straight over them so that my stitching doesn't get wonky on the sides like it just did there. Kind of shifted on me. Oops. Flip it over and come back up from the bottom. And just going over where that G is. And that just adds some extra strength there. Totally not necessary. I just like it. So now what we need to do is we need to match the bottom corner cutout, the bottom seam, goodness, with the side seam. So open up that seam on the side and match up the center seam, the center of the seams together and add a clip. So I'm just going to do this because the bag is kind of big. So the seam here on the side matches the seam on the bottom, and when you have your bag completed, it'll look like it's one continuous seam. Add some clips. Now, you can also reach your hand into the bag and just make sure that everything is smooth in that corner because you don't want any puckers. So again, open that side seam, just like that. line up the side seam with the bottom seam. Oh, there you go. You can see what I'm doing there. And then flatten it, just like that. Just going to reach in. And now we're going to sew across these corners using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And this is where I will sew across it twice, just for extra security, extra strength. Make sure that seam stays open. Back to the beginning and go again. And then repeat that for the other side. And the nice thing is, because the bottom is top stitched, you don't have to worry about that seam shifting on you because we've top stitched it to stay open. Now you can do as I mentioned with the lining, I believe it was, where I said to stitch those top seams open. You can do that here as well. So you could do that before you sew those bottom corners. Oh, the magnetic snaps are stuck together. That's kind of funny. I'm going to open this zipper all the way. And now, because I want these to be open, I'm going to stitch this within the seam allowance to press it open and keep it pressed open. Just like that. So pressing that seam open, and then I'm basting it or stitching it open just within the seam allowance just to help keep it open. That's very important because we want to ensure we don't have a lot of bulk in the top here when we're sewing. So remove any threads. There we go. So you can already see the bag taking its shape, which is really nice. I like that the Decoville is attached to the foam. Personally, that's just one of my things that I really like, because when you have a Decoville, I find attached to other fabrics, I find it tends to make it wrinkle, and even though you press it and everything, it just stays a little bit wrinkled, and it just kind of frustrates me. So now we need to finish the backpack. So we have our exterior. Make sure that zipper is unzipped, and make sure your flap is tucked down, everything is tucked down inside the bag. So you want to turn the exterior, sorry, I just told you to do all that for no reason. You want to turn your exterior right sides out. However, first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to trim down this seam allowance just a little bit, just to reduce some bulk. I know it's not in the pattern, but just reducing some of the bulk there, just so that when it's turned out, yeah, there we go. So now we're going to turn this right side out. Sorry, I was thinking it was going to be the opposite way. It's a big bag, but it's hard for me to do. And I see the thread. Just be careful when you're turning. You don't want to pop any stitches. Okay. Actually, this is a good part because we get to see what the bag is going to look like when it is done, or you sort of get an idea. So if you close this, you sort of get an idea of how the bag is looking when it's done. All right, so with the zipper open, just like that, and your flap down, you're going to place this inside your lining. So your lining is right sides out, or wrong sides out. make sure your zipper pocket, peekaboo, is open. And we are going to place the exterior inside the lining of the bag. Now, you'll want to decide if you want this pocket on the back or if you want it on the front. The choice is really yours. I'm putting it on the back. So I'm putting backs together when I put it inside the bag. My hands are starting to get sore. I'm going to stand up for this part because it's a big bag and it's hard to maneuver it. Now make sure everything is down out of your way. So for example, this strap here that you have for your D-ring with your swivel hook on it, the ribbon, make sure that's pushed down. You want to line up the side seams. So this side seam here, line them up just like we did with the bottom seam and corner seam. Make sure there is nothing in the seam up here at the top besides your lining, exterior, and your zipper tape. That's all that should be up here right now. So line up that side seam. Clip it together. And I have the zipper tape going down into the bag. So you can use some tape right now if you want before you put it together to hold the zip down. I'm just using my hand to push it down. But you can use some tape or a pin if you want. You could do that before you put it in the lining or do it now while you're clipping. What you want is you want it to veer down into the bag. So see, there's my zipper, and you want it to go down into the bag. Just like that. I'm going to do this side. And I can feel it there. There we go. So now, oops, I'm going to line up my center marks here. There's one center mark. And this will just make sure that everything is nice and even. And now we're going to continue pinning the rest of the way around, making sure the top is lined up. So clip, clip, clip all the way around. Add as many clips as you feel you need. And then I'm going to grab out my extension table because this is a pretty big bag. Ow. And I don't want to have to fight with it with the weight of the bag pulling it down under my machine. So I'm going to install my extension table. Just need to push this forward a bit. And now we are going to sew around the entire top of the bag using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So I'm just going to find what that is after I add a couple extra clips here because it's shifting on me. There we go. So we're ensured the raw edges match. Now we're going to sew around the entire top and make sure you keep your seam allowance around that zip tape. So let's do this. So starting, just pick a point to start. If you have to, change to your zipper foot. and just go slow. Trying to get around this curved part here where the sides are. I wonder if I can tilt my camera a bit so you can kind of see a bit of more of what I'm doing. It's hard because then you don't really see very much because of the bag being in the way. I'm at the side here, and I'm fighting with it. All right, there we go. So I'm just sewing. Now I'm over at the side, and this is where the zipper is, so where it's veered down. I already went over it on the other side. It's right here where I'm finding I have a hard time because the shape of the bag is so big. It's not that it's hard to do it, it's just that the bag kind of fights you, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. But I win. So I went all the way around. I ended up backstitching over, I had it up too high. I ended up backstitching a bit over where it already went. So now we need to turn this out, right sides out. But before I do that, I'm also going to trim this here because I didn't trim it earlier, but I want to trim it so there's not as much bulk. Just helps reduce some of the bulk. And I always try to point my scissors out away from the fabric when I'm cutting over bulk like that I know it's going to be hard to get through, because if I slip and I cut towards the fabric, then I'm cutting into my bag, and I don't want to do that. Alrighty, now we need to turn this right sides out, reach in through the pocket and grab the bag. Oh my goodness. I may have to get my daughter to do this if I can't. Where's that flap? I want to get the flap out. The hardware. There we go. I can feel it, and it's sort of what's stopping me from pulling it. Oh my goodness. I think I'm stuck. Oh my goodness. I can't get this out. Okay, so I'm stuck at this point. I'm going to pause the camera and I'm going to pull this out, keep turning it if I can't. My daughter is home. I may ask her if she'll be able to do it, but I'm going to keep working at it and get it turned right sides out. When I come back, I will have it all pinned at the top edge. I may even press that top edge, and then I'll show you how to top stitch it and add our purse feet and all that other stuff. So I'm going to do that off camera. I just don't feel you need to sit and watch me fight with this while I'm doing this. Sorry about that. So I'm going to continue to turn this right sides out off camera. All right, so my daughter came to the rescue and turned the bag right sides out for me because it was stuck. So now it's all right sides out, but I do it so that my lining is actually out so that I can top stitch my bag because I don't have a free arm on my machine. So I just find it's a little bit easier to do it this way. So I'm going to check that my bobbin is full just to make sure that I don't run out of bobbin while I'm stitching this. Yeah, we're good. The last thing I want to do is run out of bobbin partway through top stitching. Oh. And I had to also put on my compression gloves because my hands were just so sore. So I'm wearing them for the end of this tutorial. Just because it'll help, which means when I film my intro, I'll also have them on. I mean, I can take them off for the intro, but so pick a seam where you want to start. I always start on a side seam. It's just a personal preference. Make sure your clip here is down into the lining. You don't want it sticking up. So make sure it's caught in the stitching so that it hangs down inside your bag. Keep your zipper out of the way. And I know you can't really see, but I'm going to try and flatten this a bit, but I have my presser foot down. And I want this to be clipped where it's going to be used, so I'll put this down like this. The nice thing about this ribbon is if your ribbon gets adjusted where one side becomes longer than the other, you can just adjust it on the swivel hook. Excuse me. So increase your stitch length to your top stitch length. If you don't want back stitching in your top seam, you can leave long thread tails and pull them through and tie them off in the back. And you can actually pull them up through the top seam, so you can use your needle to pull it up through the top seam so that there's not a knot within the lining. And I also pressed while I was off camera. I pressed the top edge of my bag. If you're using a vinyl or something like that that you can't press with your iron, you can just use some clips on the top edge here to help hold everything down and in place. Just be careful too when you are pressing with your iron that you do be careful not to hit the magnetic snaps. You don't want to demagnetize those. And just keep going around the whole top edge of the bag. Just keep going all the way around until you get back to where you started. Careful not to let your zipper end up under your needle because you will break a needle and potentially damage your bag. So you don't want to do that. Trim your threads. Where did they go? There they are. The one bonus of using a thread that kind of matches is that you don't see the back stitching as much, but then it's hard to find the threads, as I mentioned before. So I'm just going to move this out of the way and see if I can do this without my daughter. Oh my goodness. There we go. Okay. Sorry, all the racket. I'll put that in here so there's not so much racket. So I'm going in through the zipper right now and I'm pressing out the corners, getting everything all nicely pressed out. I'll reach down into the lining of the bag and I'll get my corners pushed out there too. Now, if you have any threads that are along the seam, what I usually like to do is look through the wrong side. So I'll go to where the seam is, I'll find where the thread is, and then I'll just take that thread that's poking through and I just pull it like I did there with this one. See this one here? There's another one right here that's kind of that's poking out. So I'll grab it and I'll pull it out, and then I just have the thread so that it's not poking out through the seams. And I'll try to do that as far as I can all the way down into the seam here. Now I won't be able to get this one out because it's right at the bottom of the bag. So I'll just trim it as close as I can. I'll pull on it so it pulls tight, and I trim it as close as I can to the bottom or to the bag. So that all looks good, but that's what I like to do because I don't really want to cut them all the time. I just want to pull them back through, because when you cut them I just worry that they're still going to poke out. So that is all done. All right, now what we need to do is add our purse feet. So what we're going to do there is your bag base that you have, depending on the base you're using. So I'm just using some Decoville Heavy because that's what I have. You'll mark the measurements for where they need to go. So I've already done that on mine. I've marked the measurements. You'll insert this bag base into the bottom of the bag. So you will have to move things around. And then, because we've already cut the holes for everything, so you've cut the holes for your bag base, you want to push your prongs through those holes, and you'll have to reach into your bag here. I feel like this one closed up after I put the fray stop on it. Through. Oh my goodness. If it can go wrong, it's gonna go wrong, right? Let's just, there we go. Just made sure that was just cut open. Okay, let's get this through. There we go. And then I have to feel for the slits on my bag base. So you're kind of doing this just by feeling. There we go. So I have it through the bag base. And I won't be able to put tape over this because I can't really see. Well, I might be able to actually. So push this down. And for this time, I'm going to actually bend the prongs outwards because it's going to be too hard to get my pliers in there to feel and see where that is. Next one. So we're going to do this with all four. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's get that through and then feel for the holes in the bag base. There we go. Gets easier the more you put on because it just wants to automatically line up if your measurements are accurate. So here's the next one. So this is purse foot number 2. And you know what? I'll be able to get tape in there. I'll be able to reach in and put tape in. So I'm just going to quickly show you. Just cut a piece of tape because I'm going to go off camera and install the rest. You really don't need to see me do this again. This is probably very boring. I feel bad when my tutorials are too long. However, definitely speed it up if you find it's too long. Ow, I just got that in the nose. So I just have the tape and I've put the tape over. So I cut a piece, cut it big enough, and then I just hold it between my fingers like this, so while I'm going into the bottom of the bag, it doesn't want to stick to anything else. I'm kind of protecting it, I guess you could say. And I'm looking to make sure that the tape is pushed down, which it is, and it's funny because the pieces are big enough that they kind of overlap. So that's how it looks right now with the purse feet. So I'm going to go off camera and install those final two. Then I'll come back and we will close the opening in the zipper. And I know I already applied my metal edge trim. I shouldn't have done that, that was for the end, but I did do it when I did. So if you don't or didn't do it yet, go ahead and install it now. I know I did it. Again, I shouldn't have, and that actually would have made turning my bag a whole lot easier because with this edge trim here, that was kind of stopping me at one point. So I'm going to install those other feet. We'll come back and we will close the opening and then we're done. Okie dokie, so all those purse feet are in, and it was nice and easy to put the last ones in because everything just lined up with the holes in the Decoville Heavy that I'm using, so it was really awesome. Now what we need to do is close the hole in our pocket. So what you want to do is pull your pocket, and I know that's really loud, I'm very sorry. Pull the pocket out, and I'm just going to trim the little fraying here that happened. It's natural, it happens. So we're going to turn our pocket under so that we can close it. Now you can take this to your iron and give it a really good press if you want. However, I'm just going to go with it with doing this. And oftentimes I just pin, I fold, just kind of eyeball it. I like to be a bit of a bag making rebel. You can use a measurement if you want. You can measure all the way around. I just kind of eyeball it, like I said. I don't know, feel like with the measurement, I kind of use my finger to measure how far I'm pushing it in so that I have an accurate seam allowance throughout the entire base of the pocket too, so that it's all the same. I'm trying to tuck these little strays in so that they don't peekaboo out on me. So I'm just adding clips all the way around. All the way around. And now we're going to stitch this closed. And you can hand stitch this if you want. It just depends. It's in the pocket. I figure I just machine stitch it closed. Nobody really sees it, but if you're one that doesn't like having this seam like this, you can definitely slit stitch this by hand. I figure it's in a pocket, nobody sees it. Once it's filled especially, you'll never see it. Okay, tuck that pocket back into your bag. Make sure everything is pushed down nicely because we have the corners of the lining. I'm just going to move these things out of the way so I have more room. There we go. All right. Unclip your ribbon with the swivel hook. My hardware has some plastic over it. Now again, if you haven't already, because you followed the pattern and didn't do what I did, which was installed my hardware before, you can go ahead and install that metal edge trim. Then when you go to close the bag, we'll snap the magnetic snaps together on the sides. So you just kind of push the side in to itself, and just like that, you'll see it holds it, and that helps give the bag its shape too. And what way you want the loose end of the zipper to hang is your choice. You can tuck it up into the bag or you can leave it hanging out. I kind of like it hanging out because it shows off that nice hardware. And I just got to get this snapped into place. Oh, it was. So there you have it. Your Buddy Backpack by Sewing Patterns by Mrs. H is all complete. We have our beautiful hardware on the flap. We have our 2 straps and our handle, which is nice because you can actually loop this over your arm and you can carry it this way. And if you're like me, sometimes you like to carry a backpack on one arm so you can put it on one shoulder or on your back. It's a nice size. It won't fit my computer because my computer is pretty big, but if you have something like a Chromebook or a tablet, it'll definitely fit inside. And the nice thing is we have that padded pocket in here too with that fleece that we had, so it can slip right in there. You have your bottle sleeve. I'll show you how that looks. So I'm just going to open the zipper nice and wide for you and slip the bottle in. Just like that, so you can see the bottle is in there. It holds it in nicely and securely. It won't fall over. And then you have your clasp that you can hang your keys on. You have pen pockets, lots of ways to stay organized. Then you have this back pocket back here. So lots of ways to stay organized and be able to access things that you need to access quickly. You can do a nice panel on the front here. You can do some embroidery on here. You could really have a lot of fun with this bag. It is a beautiful bag. It's a nice size. I really like it. This could be a great bag, say if you have a child who's in school and they need to bring a change of clothes with them, you can put them in this. You could use this as a gym bag because you could definitely fit a pair of shoes and a change of clothes in here. This is an excellent backpack. I really love it and I think it's so beautiful. I kind of want to keep it for myself. I keep saying that with every bag I've made lately, that I want to keep them for myself, but I kind of want to keep this for myself because it's just so nice and I love butterflies and it's so beautiful. And I like when you open this up that you've got this pocket back here. Now you'll notice I have rivets here, and that is because I made a boo-boo and I got excited when I was installing my rivets back here. And when I went off camera, I fixed that. So what happened was I put them all the way through, and she does say in the pattern to be careful that you're only going through the layers here. You're not going through all the way through. I did, but saved by adding just some rivets through here as well so that it covers up their holes. So now I just have some extra bling inside my pocket. So again, this is the Buddy Backpack. I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me and maybe picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Don't forget to take lots of photos of your bag and post them on social media using the hashtags given in the pattern and also in the Facebook group. I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.